But Murong's aura seemed particularly different this time. Not only did he drop the long sword in his hand, but the sound that came from his mouth was even more chilling. His brothers were already facing life or death. Tian Yang was filled with immense grief, but the words that came out of his mouth were, "Old guy, come back." At this moment, the leader of the demon cult noticed someone else was rushing to their death. The fifth brother, who had just been beside him, was unexpectedly cut down to the ground. He hadn't even shouted for the fifth brother. He himself instantly lost his strength in just one exchange. The opponent had just crossed blades with him. How did he suddenly appear above him? Before he could react, he had already lost consciousness from a blow by the opponent's knee. Then, as his vision flickered, what would their expressions be? At the critical moment, Lao Si also rushed over. Several brothers, almost simultaneously, launched an attack on Eagle Eye Ridge. But then Lao Si suddenly had a change. What appeared was not the blade edge. The trunk seemed to have cracks like jade porcelain. Seeing this scene, Tian Yang was even more anxious. He fiercely swung his weapon at the ghostly man again. But he heard a mocking remark come from the man's mouth. "I really want to see what your loyal little brothers' faces would look like if I cut off your phone." He punched Nine Sister in the abdomen. Then, he skillfully caught the thrown crescent blade. He threw it back towards the direction of the flying cold arrow. Second brother, barely dodging, was horrified to discover the crescent blade struck the tree. Yet she had no idea what strange quality the opponent's weapon possessed. In an instant, her long sword shattered like tofu. The oppressive feeling of death enveloped every pore of the girl's body. But her opponent seemed to suddenly be invigorated. Unexpectedly dropped the crescent blade in hand, and Yin Tonglin still wore that saintly yet sinister smile on her face. While appreciating the girl's keen perception, he swung his knife towards her neck. Although Ju Mei reacted, she raised her sword to defend. At this moment, Tian Yang realized that his brothers seemed to understand his thoughts. They all rushed forward. Ju Mei even shouted for the elder brother to be careful. "This guy is too dangerous." Just facing him gives the illusion that one could be erased in an instant. But their strength was far too different from Commander Zhen Ying's. He saw the devil sneer. Before he knew it, the devil had dodged Tian Yang's strike. Even the cold arrows that come from the air can be easily avoided by looking up. The British commander sacrificed several followers under his crescent blade. Seeing this scene, Tian Yang felt his scalp go numb. A devil that can strike down even his own people. He didn't want his brothers to confront him. With a roar, he charged forward with his sword. And what was worse at this moment was that Captain Ding seemed to have lost his patience. Compared to the encirclement of Tian Yang and his group, the captain's remark about truly tarnishing the reputation of the demon sect made them even more frightened. Only a breath away. And now, with the deadlock, they dared not hope for their superior to intervene. They could only pin their hopes on the fourth assassin, who was on the same mission to join them soon. But what they didn't know was that this hope had already been completely extinguished by Shu ere not long ago. They found quite troublesome. This old man looked to be no weaker than that man at all. Although they themselves were the ninth faction of the sect, their strength was not considered a mainstay within the sect. But in the martial world, who could resist their encirclement? But the more I think about it, the more frustrated I feel. I have this illusion that I've been outsmarted by this group of annoying good people. As for dealing with these cult members, it has become increasingly harsh, which only makes them feel worse. Originally, Tian Yang's combat power. He regarded it merely as a small stepping stone. But the atmosphere here in the counterfeit sect seems to be a harmony I've never felt in the martial world. And that tormenting little demon has been unreservedly guiding my training these past 6 months, despite my initial disdain for it. No one knows what he is thinking. Although he is a person of the martial world, his roots can be traced back to an ambitious politician. What he hates the most is participating in dangerous affairs, but now he doesn't even understand what he is doing. He clearly didn't care at all about this small place back then. To personally shatter the hopes of such a grand and imposing group would be the most interesting thing. This old man, full of resentment, was originally a top-ranking member of the Zhengdao Alliance in Hebei. He originally felt frustrated in the alliance. Therefore, he turned to the territory of the Lulin Alliance to make a name for himself. But it's getting late. Isn't that right? Upon hearing this, the leader in black removed his mask. He grinned and said, "As you wish. What we need to do now is to teach them a lesson for offending me at Wufeng village before the little guy arrives." It's just that during the chaos of the two sides fighting, General Kui, who was watching from the sidelines, lost his patience. A cold voice reached the ears of the black-clad leader. "I believe I shouldn't need to intervene, right?" Hearing this, Tianyang Xianxi was taken aback, muttering the name of the blood child. Then I smiled broadly. "That's right. You're right. We still have an ace up our sleeve." At the same time, Ju Mai also returned to the group, indicating that the elder brother found it strange. Why does he think we would die? Has he forgotten what will happen if we hold on a bit longer? Come on, you know you were wrong. Are you going to recount your past to everyone in detail? The honest fifth one chuckled as well. He expressed his surprise that the big brother was actually married. Shouldn't we meet the sister-in-law, leading everyone down this dead end? I guess I've already lost the qualification to be your boss, but I really can't just turn a blind eye to this. At that moment, the fourth one suddenly burst out laughing. It was a rare moment of levity amidst the tension. He heavily told everyone that he had just sent Liu Di to the mountain below to seek medical help. "So, brothers, I'm sorry for what I just witnessed. It reminded me of my wife and children far away. I couldn't help but rush forward." Although everyone had received help from Shuiz, their martial arts had greatly improved. He clearly remembered that half a year ago, this seemingly fierce older brother was still weak enough to be regularly beaten up by the guards of passing merchant caravans. How could one feel so strong that it feels abnormal? Yet Tianyang didn't seem the least bit pleased. In his moment of distraction, he was forcefully struck by Tianyang, shattering his jawbone. Looking at the reliable Tianyang, the fourth brother momentarily felt a strange sense of not recognizing his own older brother. Murong found it even more unbelievable. As expected, a sound of shattering was heard. But what shattered was his own paper tiger. An unforeseen scene left the bloodthirsty cultists stunned. This man's ferocity seemed to far exceed their expectations. Seeing him raise his fist towards him, he could only feel it was too ridiculous. The weapons have all been thrown away. Isn't this kind of attack a bit too childish? Gripping the paper tiger tightly, he collided with the tough guy. But the cultists did not give him time to lament. They surged forward, determined to take down this group of clowns. But another long sword blocked their assault. The man in black at the front looked up. It was actually the man who had just been chatting with Chu Yunhan in the back. The entire Hebei Zhengdao Alliance might just be easily wiped out. At the same time, he realized the power his elder brother displayed when he took down the two earlier. How shocking it is to place this in the former Wufeng Zhai. This thought just surfaced in his mind. He was shocked to find himself already drenched in sweat. What does this mean? He knows. With just this group of people, in an instant, he was overpowered by Seven's strength. The fourth brother was even more perceptive. He faced the group of opponents directly, sensing the aura emanating from each of them. It seemed to surpass the level of Murong's when he first ascended the mountain. Devoid of humanity and ridiculously strong. How could a leader of a business alliance end up in such a situation? but it was too late to say anything. The third brother preferred swift swords and tough foes. Yet, in front of opponents whose strength and agility far surpassed his own, a small mistake can lead to irreversible consequences. But Tianyang doesn't want to be the big fool either. It's commonly seen stuck in the ground. Tilting his head slightly, he questioned Chu Yinhai. How on earth did he provoke such a group of beasts? However, they were not from a martial background, and they were outnumbered. Their opponents were the demonic sect that once turned the entire martial world upside down. Even the weakest of the sect members made them feel like they were treading on thin ice. Still chooses to go alone, and each brother's face is filled with comfort and joy. Not a single person crossed life and death. Even the most perceptive old Murong chose to stand with the boss. Fallen grass becomes bandits, but it is this small group that retains a heart full of passion. Eldest brother Tian Yang, to prevent the cultists from defiling young girls. Knowing it is impossible, the woofing season is not something that can be destroyed just like that. They were just ordinary people, common folks, nothing special. Blood turns everything into mere fodder. For help and Yubi won't wait for the 10th sister to speak. Then we charged down together with the brothers. Tian Yang knew what Dahua was thinking, but could only silently apologize. Brothers, let's make a big scene together. Since the eldest brother has taken action, we can't pretend we didn't see it. Let's arrange for the 10th sister to keep an eye on Rongshan. No matter what happens, she must not make a sound. Rongshan is still waiting. 3 more rushed toward the man, but suddenly their path was blocked by an arrow. They raised their heads and looked against the light. On the hillside, there was unexpectedly another stunning girl. Behind her, the 4th brother was still sighing. Tian Yang raised his sword and struck down. He immediately beheaded one person. Seeing this scene, the leader of the black-clad cult was also extremely surprised. With a command, I really didn't expect that there was actually a rat hidden here. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 black-clad disciples of General Dong, who had just died, rushed toward Tianya. These 2 clearly underestimated our big boss. He understands that the group in front of him is not something he can shake. Yet witnessing this scene, he still chooses to swallow his pride. Then he wouldn't have chosen to become an outlaw. General Kui glanced at Pang Tianyang. He could see that the other party didn't have much energy in him. Now, in the village, he is already the number 1 under Shuas, but he is also very humble. He doesn't want to spark any competition. That's why he has kept a low profile. Even so, actually, they were not entirely wrong. Not exactly. Although Tianyang's martial arts were not high, he, as the chief leader, he worked the hardest in private, learning martial arts from Shuya. Then, a stranger's angry shout was heard not far away. Everyone who heard this looked surprised. Someone would step forward in this situation. If not an unparalleled expert, then they must have lived far too long. When they began tearing at the desperate girl, no matter how much he cried out, it did nothing to slow the movements of these beasts. In the midst of danger, justice was being silenced. However, the urgency of his daughter's safety made him feel a glimmer of hope despite his helplessness. Yet President Meng proceeded. A group of black-clad cultists grew increasingly impatient. General Kui had not yet left. The girl had already fallen into despair. Chu Yun'an angrily cursed this group of beasts, but he understood perfectly well. Trading with these people who treat lives as mere grass, there is no trust to speak of. He looked at the crowd of believers. He continued, "Enjoy the cleanup of the toys, little ones. I must first report back to the master." Upon hearing this, if we had accidentally killed everyone just now, this thing would have been hard to find. It took so much effort to make you aware of the consequences of troubling me. As he spoke, he handed over the treasure that could bring chaos to the martial world. He thought this would at least give them a quick end. But General Kui looked at the iron box and muttered softly. Suddenly, he showed a strange expression. He chuckled. It's hidden quite well. He sacrificed nearly his entire family, but still couldn't complete the mission of escorting this so-called treasure. But, as a father, even if he couldn't protect his daughter's life, he didn't want her to die with regret. And so, amid the ecstatic joy of the demons, being humiliated by others was more terrifying than being killed. He could only order the guards to take out the iron box he had hidden. He indicated that they could take it. Just let my daughter go. Indeed, Chu Yunhan tried his best. They rushed towards him eagerly, but suddenly they heard an angry roar from the old man. The 8 pillars can be handed over, as long as they spare his daughter. Chu Yunnan was terrified. He gave orders to his subordinates to do it right in front of his father, to enjoy this girl's delicate softness. When a group of demonic cultists heard this, their blood boiled. Hearing this, Chu Yunnan instantly lost his sanity. He angrily shouted that they were scum. They were beasts. Since there was no way for him to escape anymore, why not just kill himself? But General Kui ignored him. I wonder if your daughter will be enough to make you surrender. I have 25 men left here. Anyway, you're all going to die here. Why not let the boys have some fun first? At least that way nothing goes to waste. Seeing this man's strong will, General Kui guessed his identity instead. I didn't expect that during the catastrophe back then, there would still be survivors. But since you're so tough, at this moment, there were very few left in the Merchant Alliance. Chu Yunhan still appeared strong and resolute. He was the only survivor of the catastrophe that happened 20 years ago under a Juice guidance. Even now, facing a deadlock, he was unwilling to let this item fall into the hands of the demonic sect. He specially reminded the other party that the martial arts used were extremely strange. It seemed like it could devour people. Never heard of it before. Hearing Mu Rong speak so mysteriously, Tian Yang watched patiently, still feeling a sense of dread. He moves closer, wanting an explanation, but it startled the two of them. Such a look. Tian Yang seemed to understand that the situation was not ideal, so he focused his gaze on Mu Rong. But ahead, at the intersection of the Demon Sect and the Merchant Alliance, is one of the few essential paths through this mountain. It's too late to turn back. As the eldest brother, Tian Yang is even more anxious, seeing the fourth brother and Mu Rong still watching. But due to her father's involvement with the demonic cult, she attracted disaster to herself. She is about to be humiliated. Although Rongshan has temporarily saved her life, if we can't handle this serious injury in time, I'm afraid we won't survive tonight. If the other party still has accomplices, I'm afraid it will be very difficult for the brothers to handle. But as long as they dare to touch the elder brothers, I will definitely destroy them. The girl from the family was originally the daughter of a merchant alliance. However, this battle had left him somewhat exhausted. The strength of this group caused Suer to suffer actual injuries for the first time since he ran out of the Liu family. At this moment he also understood. Clad figures and the Nine Heavens sword technique re-emerged. By the time the cultists reacted, but it was already too late. As a strong golden light erupted in the valley, Shu had eliminated all the attackers. I haven't even seen him make a move. Their special operations team has almost been wiped out. They don't dare to act again for a while. But this also gives Suer a perfect opportunity. Gathering strength, he charged towards the group of black. Each of them probably has the strength to take on 10 old Murongs. Even though I am fully focused, I still can't achieve a swift victory. At this moment, the cult members are silently lamenting. This little demon's combat power is simply off the charts. but how he then managed to devour the living was something he couldn't figure out. Meanwhile, over here with Sueru, under the assault of the black-clad men, things are no longer as easy as before, but Murong had the broadest perspective. Such a bizarre event was even more shocking to him. The nine-toothed giant's hand was engraved with fortune and prosperity. At the moment of activating the gunpowder, it seemed as though the power of fortune and prosperity was infused into his unique internal energy. They couldn't even cry for help before being dragged down. Only the dark ebony, like the mouth of an abyss, remained in place. Seeing this scene, fourth brother and Murong were both almost unable to believe it, as if they were seeing a monster. Just one glance. This group of guards seemed to step into the void, and were swallowed by the pool of water. This water seemed to have endless power, climbing up their bodies and faces. Suddenly, we heard General Kui give a cold snort. He pulled out a very strange gunpowder barrel from behind. He casually tossed it out. It exploded in mid-air, scattering purple-black debris that fell to the ground. Miraculously, it transformed into patches of black and purple water. In a fit of rage, they severely injured 2 members of the demon sect. They stood guard around the president. We need to save the young lady. Although our momentum is strong, we have yet to charge in front of the opponent. This made Murong panic and flustered. If that man discovers them, he could instantly annihilate this group of scum. Under such circumstances, he could only signal the fourth master to peek and watch. At this moment, the guards of the Merchant Association also chose not to sit idly by. The man now appearing there was probably even more formidable than the immortal Yuchi he encountered before. What kind of organization could tame such powerful people so orderly? The fourth master beside him gently asked. Though he had the build of a strong man, he seemed entangled by demonic forces. Seeing this scene, Murong's heart skipped a beat. The strength of those men in black, although each one was stronger than him. However, he was suddenly startled by a shadow behind him, breaking out in a cold sweat. The newcomer was 9 feet tall, with a face like a jujube. His figure resembled that of a top general, comparable to the 9 great masters of the martial world. The aura he emitted was also extremely strange. If Bazu Zhong cannot report back, the leader over there will not spare him. Just thinking about the disgusting Sani Yao Shindan, the great protector shivered all over. His gaze gradually darkened. They have no way to leave. Although it has lost its meaning, they can only remain in a stalemate for now. However, this current situation is not what the other party wants to see. They have traveled thousands of miles to pursue here. Facing such a deadlock, Chu Yunnan became much clearer-headed. For the entire Jianghu, Bazu Zhong is a beacon of hope, and even if he hands himself over. But this group of black-clad men from the Devil Sect has already completely taken control of them. They've even lured the leader of the Wound Alliance, like a cat playing with a mouse, to hand over 8 plants of Fie. He could let him and his daughter go. Otherwise, that young girl might end up in pieces. If that group of black-clad men still have accomplices, I'm afraid they'll be the ones causing trouble up ahead. And the Smoke Rain Guild is now almost exterminated. Even though Chu Yunnan comes from the women, he is now completely exhausted from the battle. He immediately signaled to block the road ahead of the raging fire. He quietly climbed up to the treetops to investigate the source of this bloody aura. He understood that the casualties left not long ago, quickly heading to the small town below, but it wasn't long before Murong suddenly felt something unusual. The bloody aura lingering in the air was not unfamiliar to this seasoned veteran, although he was used to being in a subordinate position. Along the way, the rough man Rong Shan was about to confess to the girl he admired, but in an instant, he nearly lost his life. This sudden misfortune also made Tian Yangxin secretly lament. He had to let Shua fend off the strong enemies again. He himself hurried down the mountain with a simple blood-stopping shirt. No matter how many come, they're all useless. They are new wave commoners, and also counterfeit bandits, headed to Wanan City to attend the Deer Forest Conference, but got caught up in the revival of the demon cult that has been brewing for 20 years. No matter what, Lao Ba is his sworn brother. This group of people attacks as soon as they meet. He has no intention of letting them have a good ending. Besides, he has already seen through their skills. Just a bunch of lowlifes. A palm landed on his head. Seeing this scene, the remaining black-clad men also realized that this kid was quite formidable. That's why they didn't immediately attack. But Shua was particularly irritated by this. Shua immediately struck the opponent's face with a punch. Then he appeared in front of the other two men in black in an instant. He struck one person in the abdomen, then kicked him away. Before the other person could react, he saw how graceful his movements were. Looking up, he suddenly heard a cold, chilling voice questioning him. "Who are you?" Scene. "Not going to say, then you can die." They didn't hold back any longer. They rushed forward. They planned to deal with this little brat blocking their way first. Then they saw the opponent slash down with a sword. Su dodged to the side. Seeing the little guy's words were resolute, and it seemed that this group of people had no intention of letting them go. Tian Yang could only grit his teeth and once again choose to rely on Shua's fighting power. Everyone quickly rushed down the mountain wearing their jackets. When the men in black saw these people fleeing, but after Shua made his move, he understood this even more clearly. With a light sigh, he told his brothers, he can handle these people alone. First, saving Lao Ba is the priority. He won't let any of these scoundrels get away. Mu Rong, the most skilled fighter here apart from the young man, was even more shaken by this scene. He knew all too well that Rongshan, who had been training with the little monster, was already very strong. Even if he ambushed him, it's impossible for him to be injured to this extent. So, this can only mean that each of these men in black is above his own martial arts level. He immediately picked up Lao Ba and asked Lao Yutiao Murong, "Do you know where the nearest town is?" After getting the answer, he headed straight down the mountain. Just as fourth brother was about to call for Shua to hurry up and leave after grabbing his luggage, he was shocked to find Shua standing still, facing off against several men in black in the trees behind them. "You can't be in trouble." But just as this big fool lost consciousness, the last words he said were that this was not what he expected. When Tian Yang saw the terrifying wound on Lao Ba's body, he felt that something was seriously wrong. It suddenly erupted in the distance with a violent roar. But all of this happened too quickly. At this moment, Ju Mei finally came to her senses. She saw Lao Ba, who was nearly fainting. He anxiously shouted, "Brother Rongshan, I just thought of this." In his eyes, he only saw a foot rapidly enlarging. Blood kicked into his face, causing his entire body to surge with blood, like an explosion of gunpowder. Blood flowed uncontrollably. To the men in black, all of this was like child's play. Today, not a single living person here will be spared. It's just a matter of whether to die first or last. What is there to fight over? But it was sudden. Only then did everyone see that Lao Ba had already been ambushed. But Rongshan's wound was too deep. The attackers had the intention of leaving no survivors. As a result, everyone almost lost consciousness on the spot. The first to react was still Rongshan. He erupted with a force he had never shown before, rushing towards Ju Mei. In a critical moment, he grabbed her arm and threw her backward. But this caused his body to be directly hit by the opponent's strike. The blood splattering before her made Ju Mei instantly alert. But suddenly, his expression changed dramatically. Right above his head, a man in black suddenly drew his sword and dove down at him. But when he sensed something unusual, The other party was already close. Instead, his face turned red. He fantasized about charmingly picking up the luggage for her. He imagined that Ju Mei would shyly call out to him as Longshan Ji. The big fool thought more and more that this was a great opportunity. Feeling delighted, he was about to reach for Ju Mei. They planned to travel a bit on this night road. However, the eighth brother was somewhat confused, but now he felt a blossoming spring in his heart. His mind and eyes could hardly part from Ju Mei for even an inch. He noticed that the other's bundle was quite large. You two can think it over slowly on the way. That's all for now. Murong didn't regret missing out on this wealth anymore. It is reasonable for the boss to prioritize everyone's safety. So everyone began to pack their bags. He said that the eldest brother means everyone should leave early now. That old man just looked so nervous. It seems that if we stay here, we will likely be seen as accomplices. And for sure, the eldest brother's words might take a while to understand. So it's wiser to be cautious when going out. Everyone can relate to this. Ju Mei feels like she just can't think clearly. She calls out to Shua, asking if he has thought about this, but was interrupted by the fourth brother. The powerful were facing great trouble. For them, it might not be something they can handle. The more exaggerated the bag of gold coins, the greater the danger he thinks he will face. With so many experiences in front of him, even if it would bring some trouble, it was not something unacceptable. But Tianyang only sighed lightly. The other party's identity and actions were too suspicious. I offered a large sum of money seeking temporary refuge, but they outright rejected me. I was the first to raise doubts afterward. On the contrary, it was Murong who was the most vigilant at first. In his view, he is the president of the First Merchant Alliance. Although I cannot speak the truth, I sincerely beg you, young heroes, to help this old man. I was originally the commander of the Merchant Alliance, yet I crawled before the mountain bandits, in utter helplessness. He pulled out a money pouch worth 10,000 times more than the old lady's savings. With a clang, the pouch full of gold coins fell to the ground, and he knelt down. That almost everyone in this group has an extraordinary aura, especially the red-haired youth. This pure feeling is even more overwhelming than the top masters I've encountered before. Moreover, there's no time left for him to hesitate now. That he had indeed been too hasty. However, the Great Protector's reputation is formidable. Now, he has no other choice. Besides, he originally came from the women. Now he can roughly discern. If they rashly accepted their proposal, they might attract unnecessary disasters. If the other party chooses not to be honest, then there's nothing left to discuss. At this moment, Chu Yunhan finally realized. He just revealed his identity. I hope to walk alongside honest people. The other party's sudden proposal, filled with pleas, was first recognized by the seasoned Murong. He saw through their urgency and desperation. Tianyang had already thought it through. If I encountered outsiders, I would say I was from the Hebei Flying Dragon sect. I even fabricated a bunch of sect-related information in my mind. But Chu Yunnan did not ask further. He understood that it was only a matter of time before the Great Protector caught up with them. If these people are from the Righteous Alliance, then perhaps it's not all in vain, so I immediately chose to approach and inquire. The other party was from the He sect, not the kind of black robes from a demon cult. One of the red-haired youths wiped his mouth. He glared gloomily at the group of people rushing at them like wild beasts. Annoyed, he asked what they meant by this, but Chu Yunhan's thoughts were in turmoil. So everyone was immediately put on alert, prepared to take the initiative. Only then did we see a group of people rushing out of the treetops. What came into the sight of the merchants was a group of people sitting around a fire, roasting game. Moreover, they were dressed in luxurious clothes. he discovered a group of people ahead. This made President Chu Yunhan even more anxious. The 8 jars in his hand are definitely to be handed over to the Zhengdao Alliance, as the demonic sect is making a comeback. If we cannot inform them in time, I'm afraid the tragedy from 20 years ago will happen again. This situation left the president of the Merchant Alliance feeling as if he had a thorn in his back at all times. However, the young girl had no idea what the other party was about. She didn't even understand why over 100 guards were present. It made her father choose to abandon the stronghold to protect himself in such a panic. At that moment, the leading guard suddenly reported back. That's why Tian Yang decided to bypass the towns near Wufing Mountain. For 100 miles, we traveled along the mountain roads in these new clothes. And so, 2 nights later, we escaped into the deep mountains with the president of the Merchant Association, his daughter, and several guards, targeted by the great protector of the evil cult. Before his execution, old Murong repeatedly reminded him, "Make sure no one recognizes them as coming from Wufing village. If the Merchant Alliance finds out that 9 out of the 10 village chiefs are missing, and that they won't be able to return to the village for months, our base will be in danger." Is just as handsome now as his biological father once was. Looking at Eames, Juer, who has become a little fangirl, Laoba feels very distressed. Fortunately, Juer is still young, so he didn't make himself miserable. However, before the brothers could exchange a few compliments, a boy's timid voice suddenly came from behind. "I've never worn such complicated clothes before. Brothers, can you help me see if I'm dressed correctly?" And Suir, who is of noble birth. This is when Tianyang finally dug out his wife's dowry from his pocket. He dressed the whole group in a set of extremely formal attire. And at this moment, the 2 village flowers looked even more eye-catching than the daughters of wealthy families. This made the rough man, who already admired Sister Ju, even more flustered. The older brothers also praised these 2 younger sisters endlessly. If they are recognized as bandits by the people of the Righteous Alliance, although the 7th Master is almost fearless. After all, 2 fists cannot defeat 4 hands. If others fall into a trap, it is likely that no matter what, the situation will become more complicated. But for the first time in a bandit's lair, he felt how much a luxurious life could change him. It turns out that traveling from Wufing Mountain to Wan'an City requires passing through the Zhengdao Alliance residence. And the world's #1 family, the Nangong Sword Saint, is also stationed here. Old Murong, who has always been a pain in the neck, finally gave a reliable suggestion this time. He said that the martial arts world is currently in the spotlight. Thinking of this, he pulled off his mask. "Since you are all considered pawns, then it should be no problem for me to decide how to kill you. And that old man will definitely not escape from my grasp." The young man was originally a pawn from a prestigious family, and when the black-robed man discovered that the other side had already escaped, he understood that the old man must have recognized his identity and silently made his escape. This only confirmed his suspicion. The object the cult leader seeks must be in that old man's hands. The object they are escorting is far too important. When the time comes, I will definitely set out with my brothers. But not now. This must not fall into the hands of the demon sect. 2 guards are covering him as he attempts to escape. They are asking the leader whether to seek reinforcements. Upon hearing this, he scolds the guards not to add to the casualties. What they need to do is to resist that person's advance with all their might. Almost no one noticed that the president's forehead was already drenched in sweat. As the man in the black robe indulged in the slaughter he hadn't experienced in years. He has already lost track of his wife, just not far away. It has grown a bit more gloomy. The main thing that my master teaches has never been able to be held on to. At the sound of the president's angry shout, the guards had already begun their assault. Any force in the Central Plains would have turned and fled, But the demon cult had been silent for too long, looking at the leader of the group of guards drawing their swords at him. He could only sigh that this martial world had truly forgotten him. When he came back to his senses, with elite troops under their command, it should have been a smooth and flawless journey, but at that moment he was blocked by a figure in a black robe. He held a ring blade. If this kind of attire had been seen a few years ago, thinking of this, he must report to the leader for a decision. And a few days later, at dusk, the president of the Misty Rain Trading Association was personally escorting a special treasure. They were originally business tycoons. Shua's earlier performance has already planted a seed in the Beastmaster's heart. The young pine stands tall like a dragon playing in the water. This depth is unfathomable. If he participates in the Deer Forest Conference, I'm afraid there will be great chaos. Looking at it this way, the future of Woofing Village should be limitless, right? I see Shua running toward the two older brothers, like a child again, and the fourth brother can only complain that they are thinking too far ahead. But what they don't know is, the brothers in the village also understood. Shua Ziqiang can no longer be viewed with a normal understanding, but this time, the little guy didn't really harm the other party. It can be seen that he is gradually becoming more dependable on the stars as well, as if afraid they couldn't find their way out of this exit, anxiously indicating that the Five Peaks season was coming, and that they had something very important to attend to. See you next time in Wanan City. With everyone's astonished gazes, Yubi vanished in a flash without a trace. Then I have to say I have things to do, so hurry up and get lost. Tianyang and Lao Si looked at Shue reprimanding the leader. Although the night wind was rustling and they couldn't hear the specifics, they finally let out a sigh of relief. Just then, the Beastmaster suddenly stood up and jumped to the gate. He really wanted to just punch him to pieces, but it seemed his brother had some reservations. That's why he glared fiercely at the Beastmaster. I won't hit you if you behave. You need to obediently greet my brothers. The pressure he felt from the youth was already on par with that of the leader. This left the usually proud Beastmaster with no intention to resist at all. He timidly raised his head and glanced at the monstrous boy. The cold aura emanating from him made him feel utterly paralyzed. As Shua looked at the old man running rampant in his home, with a thud, the proud Beastmaster of the 12 heroes of Deer Forest knelt down on the ground. His hands trembled uncontrollably. He seemed to have aged a few years, although he had not yet used all his strength, waving at him, revealing its terrifying skeletal form. Until the moment the boy's fist stopped before him, the messenger let out a sigh. He left just like that. The small fist finally stopped right in front of the old man, even as the wild winds rage behind him. The punch in his eyes has occupied his entire field of vision. Large beads of sweat fall like rain. Just moments ago, he clearly felt as if a messenger from a great ship was slowly approaching him. Just as the fist, like a heavenly punishment, was about to strike his body, the leader anxiously shouted, "Shua, hold your ground," and the dragon god devoured the wind. At that moment of mastery, he could only wait for his demise. At that moment, Tianyang's voice suddenly interrupted at the wrong time. "Shua, show mercy." The unstoppable youth frightened the old man, who was originally in a position of power to the core. When he reappeared, he had already bypassed his defenses. A punch was charged up. He wanted to make this old man feel just how vast the gap between them really was. And the old man realized he could not evade. He understood that Jinji was facing a true monster. Then, he heard the boy's voice drifting over. "You have killing intent. Then I won't hold back." Before his words fell, the boy suddenly disappeared from the Beastmaster's sight. He could sense that the strange old man was going all out against him. Since that's the case, I heard the crisp sound of bones snapping. The Beastmaster's 2 fingers were suddenly broken. He was still in a daze. With 2 fingers forming a sword, he met the imposing palm strike head-on. In an instant, golden light flickered, yet it failed to shake the little guy in the slightest. The boy lowered his head, sullen. His eyes gradually grew cold and sharp. A purple serpent lunged at Shua, baring its fangs and claws. Under his power was the left shoulder of the 4-year-old boy. Seeing this scene, Shua's gaze gradually calmed down. It's like an extremely plump old dog. The birthday celebrant, hearing this, was no longer angry. Only a flash of purple light appeared in his eyes. In an instant, he closed in. His inner strength gathered at his fingertips. For him, a worthy opponent for a thrilling battle has become rare. I didn't expect to find such an opportunity here. But before he could finish speaking, he heard Shua snorting with laughter like a pig, mocking how the Beastmaster's title sounds like that of a dog king. It would be more accurate to say that this boy alone bore the burden of defeating the #1 master of Wudang. These 2 bastards didn't even tell me the truth in advance. They didn't clarify the situation. Now I find myself in a situation that's hard to get out of. But soon, the master revealed an extremely happy expression. He also saw him leisurely patting off the dust from his body. At this moment, the boy in his eyes had already shifted from surprise to horror. Recalling the reactions of a few people in the village earlier, he finally felt that the rumors seemed to be greatly mistaken. Rather than saying the 10 masters of Wufing village, but you are still too inexperienced. And this scene made the Beastmaster break out in a cold sweat, staring blankly at the boy who looked like a monster. He didn't know if he was really drunk. It felt more like he was just playing around with him. He grasped the slightly cool, hardened weapon in one hand. He is still complaining. If he had the strength of a jade skin, it would indeed give him a terrible headache. At the moment he clenched his fist. The hardened weapon that should have completely merged with the young man's body suddenly emitted a sound like metal clashing at his neck and in Shua's eyes. Although this strange old man's moves were very peculiar, it seemed that the Beastmaster had no intention of stopping. He knew this kid wouldn't be so easy to deal with. His gaze gradually became fierce. Once again, a chilling aura enveloped the surroundings. This time, he wants to make this arrogant young man kneel and bow to him to admit his mistake, fearing that if Blood got angry, will he kill his boss? However, the Beastmaster did not wait for the boy to react. In an instant, he detonated the energy at the boy's neck. A series of crackling sounds erupted, actually reformed into a circular solid energy around the boy's neck. Such a bizarre scene made 9th sister and 10th sister extremely anxious. They were simply afraid that Blood would be in danger because of them. But Tianyang and the 4th brother were even more nervous. Has a look of disdain written all over his face, which only infuriates the Beastmaster even more. He raises his internal strength to 80%. Growing up with one hand, the true energy that had just been shattered, any part of the body that comes into contact will be invaded by the cold energy entering the meridians. In recent years, countless top masters have suffered great losses because of this. And the young man before me, even the Shadow Wind Beast Lord, looked utterly incredulous. His Shadow Wind skin appeared soft, but it harbored ice within, let alone dispersing it, without using more internal energy to form hardness. But unexpectedly lets out a pig-like squeal. He looks at the overwhelming and fierce inner strength coming at him. He easily resolved it with a single move. And if this had happened in the past, he would have never been able to do it. He just prays that Shua will go easy. As he gazes at the chilling wind approaching, Shua finally wakes up from his apathy. His inner strength is quite unique. The young man faces off against a top expert again. This remark enraged the usually high and mighty Beast Lord. Feigning indifference, he turned his head, signaling he wouldn't stoop to argue with a kid. but then he secretly gathered purple flames in his palm. Suddenly, he spun around and clawed at Shua. At this moment, Tianyang has figured it out. Considering Shua's temperament, looks like the leader is bound to be offended. Sure enough, the little guy sleepily asked the fat one, "Are you looking for a fight in our village?" The young man clearly had just woken up. He silently walked slowly toward the Wind Shadow Beast Master. However, the faint sense of danger emanating from Shu Arabs made the Beastmaster feel a bit uneasy as well. At this moment, Tianyang and the fourth brother were feeling a headache. "I didn't expect the expert from your village to be a young man. Are you so afraid of me meeting him? Because you think I can't handle even a young boy?" Upon hearing this, everyone realized that the person standing behind the junior sister was actually Chu Ere. I just felt it was utterly absurd, but this scared my junior sister into a cold sweat. He has no control over killing intent. After a moment, I saw the Beast Lord smile faintly. Just as she was confused, she asked who dared to emit killing intent toward her. Following the direction it came from, she was shocked to see that it was her seemingly frail junior sister. Even the big guy was stunned. Just as they prepare to teach this little creditor a lesson, the leader suddenly throws something from above. The eerie feeling made her, a seasoned warrior, decide to assess the situation first. But behind her were only a few rough-looking men who seemed harmless, and two stunningly beautiful hostess girls. "Then don't blame me for making you lose face. Each of you has to break a couple of bones for me." As I observe the atmosphere between you all, Tianyang and the fourth brother feel like there's no saving it. This commotion is likely attracting the main host's attention, but this statement made the Beastmaster suddenly darken his expression. He slightly turned his head, glaring at Tianya with a face full of anger. "Are you teaching me how to do things? Since you don't appreciate my kindness, you've ruined my mood. This fine liquor wouldn't taste good." But at that moment, a hand suddenly rested on his wrist. Tianyang had a face full of smiles. While saying that there are many more girls in the city than in our village, he seemed to plead for the adult to lower their voice. He started yelling. He insisted that they come and drink with him. This really left them in a tough spot. Then I heard the fat guy shouting that they were the most handsome ones around. Without them to drink with, why? The two girls were no exception. They ran out with dark circles under their eyes, but they saw the president of the Deer Forest Alliance, drunk and making a scene. Only then did I feel that trouble was coming, and when he spotted the two sisters. The 9th and 10th sisters were indeed deep asleep, but the noise outside was too loud. This gradually woke the two girls from their dreams. Now, due to the presence of the revered Buddha in the village, everyone clearly felt much less vigilance as mountain bandits. Tianyang and the fourth brother were really panicking now, but the host of the celebration wouldn't understand. What they were actually afraid of was something else, and by the time they returned to the stronghold on Woofing Mountain, it was already late at night. The Beast Lord's bad temper flared up, but no matter what, they are all people I just recognized. I didn't want to make them look too bad. I hurried back to the mountain stronghold, stepping forward as if I didn't know anyone. Neither of them dared to show jealousy in front of the high-ranking official. But they couldn't just sit by and watch their sister walk into a tiger's den. They said it was getting late. Everyone should be asleep by now. Seeing that the two weren't happy. Speaking of which, Yin Feng Shouju was quite the alcoholic as well. Plus, having drunk too much now, he slammed his cup down in anger, and shouted for Meiju and Mai Shi to come serve him. But this left Tianyang and Lao Si in a tough spot, making this table of delicacies suddenly lose its appeal. After glancing at the girl who was serving him drinks, he felt an even greater sense of disparity. He didn't really want anything from the two sisters. He just felt that someone of his status should have such beautiful women to drink with to make him happy. They even called in the 2 top courtesans. Yet, after 3 rounds of drinks, he still appears with a frown. Thoughts of the 2 sisters from the village, like drifting mist, echo in his mind. If they woke up and the 2 of them caused a scene, that would truly be what they were most worried about. It seems he should spend more time teaching the little one about human affairs in the future. The fat man in the honored seat is enjoying the blessings of extraordinary people, but still looks very displeased. They plan to take him down to the town for some fun. Although the 2 of them were in a rush, which made the host a bit unhappy, he noticed they were quite capable, so he didn't hold it against them. Little did he know that the explosives in the village were currently in a deep sleep. He wanted to say let them host him for dinner. His gaze was also maliciously sweeping toward Juemai and Shimei. However, upon hearing this, Tianyang didn't wait for him to say anything more. He immediately called Lao Si to help support this esteemed person as they walked outside. It was only after coming to his senses through the haze of drunkenness that he realized it was the 2 of them. So their Wufeng village has already gained recognition. If they can achieve good results at the summit, then there was an opportunity to gain continuous support and protection from the Deer Lemon. Seeing Tianyang holding the invitation with an excited look, this beastmaster still has a bit of a thief's heart. They suddenly seemed as deflated as a punctured ball. They couldn't even be bothered to play along with them anymore. He seriously informed them that Lulingmeng will hold a summit in July. Along the way, he had already confirmed that Yuji Zenran was indeed up to no good. I'm afraid the village's situation will become even more dangerous. For now, we can only wait and see how the eldest brother handles this matter. When he found out that the 2 girls were brothers from the village, Jozu unexpectedly showed a very cheerful expression. You can hear that both of them lost interest as soon as they entered, but it hadn't reached the point of breaking ties yet. If Shua comes and hears about his bad ideas for Juemai and Shimei, he will definitely go up and give them a good beating. At that time, we'll be involved with the entire Lulin alliance. Unexpectedly not minding what the other meant, he let him start introducing the situation here. Off to the side, old Lu was still asking 4th brother if they should call Shua over, but 4th brother quickly hushed him. The old man's behavior was frivolous and defiant. Can they ensure the survival of Wufeng village? Isn't that right? The words, spoken with a hint of drunkenness, surprised the host slightly. The young village chief was clearly giving him a hint. Lulin had never provided them with protection, so he waved his hand. Did you specifically call for me to serve you, my lord? But at this moment, Tianyang appeared much calmer. He pretended not to hear the latter part of that. He replied that the other 3 brothers have gone into seclusion. Only by working hard like this, and the master of the Yin Wind was not in a hurry. First he took a few big swigs of old wine. Then he asked, aren't there 10 brothers? Why are only 7 people here? And there are also 2 such lovely little sisters. Clearly, they had previously ignored the situation here. Why now the dignified ruler of Deer Forest Province? They specifically came to this small place, Wufeng village. Everything is unclear. Everyone could only listen to him timidly. It turns out that this seemingly inconspicuous drunkard is actually the Shadow Wind Beastmaster of the 12 Shadows of Deer Forest. He is also the leader of the Deer Forest's Meng Tuzi in this province. For a moment, the 7 brothers in the Jui Hall looked at the adults on the stage with confusion. They truly did not understand, but today, an uninvited guest has arrived outside Wufeng village. Just as this person was about to shout, Tianyang rushed over with several brothers, gasping for breath as they looked at the newcomer. He introduced himself there. It was then that he unexpectedly obtained the Indra Sutran, has become the greatest among the top 10 masters today, and has subdued the 12 major Deer Forest factions that have been in conflict for many years. He granted them the title of the 12 Eagles of the Deer Forest, to manage all the bandits and outlaws in the martial world. It happened to cover the Buddha statue that hadn't been moved in time. The young demon lord watched this scene. He didn't think much of it. He just saw the dilapidated Buddha statue and felt a bit of melancholy. Moreover, the abbot is very fond of him. However, his connection to Buddhism is weak, so he can only sigh at it from afar. 15 years ago, he passed by an old warehouse. Suddenly, he discovered that the ceiling had collapsed. The little monks see him as a fierce beast, yet, in the eyes of the simple-hearted young demon lord, he puts in a lot of effort just to repay the old monk's kindness, and he does not mind their unusual gazes, and he will be the one to unify the green lemon as the breakthrough demon lord. It turns out that in his youth he was adopted by Shaolin, but for some reason he possesses a natural strength. In the temple, he works even harder than the monks, seeing him lift over a ton with his bare hands. But he couldn't control his own brute strength. By accident, he made a hole in the Buddha's belly. Yet within his belly lies an ancient and exquisite book. He nervously examines it carefully. Little does he know that this will soon change the entire landscape of the martial world. Now I understand why he is so fearless. It must be their mother. But since she has shown her fangs towards me, there is no such thing as mercy for me, the Lord of the Yin Wind. This demon is devoutly wiping the statue of Buddha amidst the ruins. While admiring the scenery, he also complained about the wild beasts here, as if they didn't know what fear was. At that moment, a huge black bear was roaring at the man. Upon closer inspection, a few little black bears are counting backward behind the man. Has already brought her a sense of satisfaction beyond her own realm. Just before summer arrived, he quietly left the mountain stronghold. A month later, a chubby man in purple slowly walked up Woofing Mountain, then revealed a smile, indicating that if you don't leave, I would have thought you were going to become a bandit too. And in ENGSUB's heart, being able to witness Shua's growth in person. One day, I will repay them. And Murong, seeing this scene, was completely shocked. I think it's better if I give up on the idea of revenge. But when Shua heard that the other party was leaving, she first felt a wave of arms. If that sword had come for me, I would have been nothing but bones by now. But everything now makes me extremely satisfied. Zheng Sir expressed that he was going to leave. This wonderful experience has already broadened my horizons. But in Murong's eyes, the young man's sword seemed to tear a crack in the sky. Even the trees trembled. In the blink of an eye, the two clashed with their ultimate moves. After a moment, ENGSUB admitted defeat, ending this duel. With a joyous laugh, he shouts at him, "Big brother, I've used my full strength too." Watching the little guy's unsurprising state, ENGSUB also took a stance, ready to confront him. But during these days, it's not only ENGSUB who is imprisoned. When the smoke clears, old Murong is shocked to discover that under such an assault, Shua is completely unharmed. The second form of the Nine Heavens sword technique condenses from his hand. Feeling the opponent's fierce aura, Shua suddenly realized he had underestimated his progress. With this sword strike, dust and smoke rose everywhere. The beautiful Woofing Mountain has been scarred deeply by the two of them. Even now, he was only a step away from the realm of their ancestral master. But I never felt that I could defeat this little guy. One may lose the person, but not the battle. ENGSUB's strike is my strongest sword now. It was as if he was encouraging himself with a roar. Is this the legendary two extremes convergence? It looks quite sharp, doesn't it? However, to ENGSUB, these words didn't sound prideful at all. The longer he spent with Shua, the more he realized the vast and boundless power dormant within the boy's body. Clearly, this was not the first time they had discussed martial arts through combat. Seeing ENGSUB in a completely different realm compared to their first encounter. He was not too surprised. In Murong's shocked gaze, he heard the little demon cheerfully comment that the old man's heavenly sword sect seemed to have made some progress again. At this moment, he was concentrating the power of yin and yang in his eyes. His gaze was firmly fixed ahead, at his opponent. At that moment, Shua also rushed towards him with a knife. He originally planned to reach the mountain top to document the overall terrain of Wolfing Mountain, in case there would be an opportunity for revenge in the future. However, he suddenly felt an overwhelming sense of pressure approaching. Feeling around and peeking out, he realized that this almost visible force was coming from UGC, was reduced to this state by the little guy, and in the old man's heart, the hatred for this little demon has reached overwhelming heights. But under the eaves, there's not much he can do for now. Seeing this scene, even Yuji was a bit at a loss. Brother Five simply bowed his head and recited sutras. If he were to be killed by Shu Erase, at least he could be spiritually liberated early, right? Just like that, a prominent figure in the province, his brothers who were horse bandits, had pure hearts. They treated him like family. From then on, Shua's life finally began to see the light. And in the face of danger, the instigator of the defection didn't show any mercy to the old man. And after his father passed away, he was locked in the warehouse by the old woman for over 10 years. Fortunately, he accidentally learned an unparalleled sword technique in the Xuan Nu realm. After escaping from Luoyang, he was picked up by bandits. Surprisingly, I think you should be prepared. Right, he is the youngest son of the sword god Liu. Yet he is regarded as a nobody because he is not the biological son. He was also ignored by his father, which led to a life of humiliation. At the same time, a voice filled with anger slowly came from afar. Old man Murong, you made such a big stir back then. Now that you're back. But the other party did not care about his thoughts. He gently reminded Chongshan. Judging the gap in strength between the two sides is also a form of cultivation. This person is indeed several times stronger than you. His legs went weak, and he nearly fell to the ground. He could never have imagined that a dignified elder of Wudang would appear in this village, and seemed so familiar with their group. Besides that little monster, how could such a terrifying person exist? When he heard Chongshan say that he didn't need his wife's help, and that he hadn't yet given his all, Murong was even more frightened. At this moment, Murong was already drenched in cold sweat. Before this, he hadn't even noticed this person's presence. Not only did they appear in front of him in an instant, but they also blocked his way with a single piece of paper in this stronghold. But at that moment, a finger suddenly pressed against his forehead. Another old man appeared abruptly in front of him. He expressed to his wife that, although he didn't know who he was, the old man had launched an attack right in front of him. This cannot be ignored. This only made Murong more embarrassed and furious. He wanted to use his internal strength to strike him. Although he didn't dare to kill him immediately, his heart was filled with anger, and he vowed to break a few of his bones first. He actually chose to confront him right at the gate. However, although Murong was shocked that his opponent could withstand several of his moves, he only thought that the other man was overly confident. Even while getting beaten on the ground, Chongshan did not forget to scold him for being a coward who backed down. At this time, Rongshan, thanks to Shue and Yuji's guidance in their spare time, has made remarkable progress in martial arts. Plus, he is a veteran who just returned from the front lines. He never felt that he would lose to that old man Murong again. Moreover, he understands the matters of the martial world better than any of us. Additionally, perhaps after he returns, he can inspire everyone to train harder. All these pros and cons are also a first for Tian Yang to face. For the moment, he is unsure how to handle it. the village will likely become extremely unstable again. And Tianyang is also quite troubled by this issue. To be honest, in terms of military strength, the old man is the strongest in the village, besides Shuo. Tianyang also received the news that old man Murong had returned. Fourth brother, looking extremely annoyed, expressed how much he dislikes this old guy. Whether it's encouraging everyone to abandon the stronghold, or his constant rebellious attitude that is always apparent. If he comes back, if it weren't for people like him betraying the Zhengdao alliance, he would never be able to return. He really can't bring himself to face this. Returning to Wufeng village, both sides suddenly feel the tension rising. At this moment, in the village, his words filled with mockery. He said that not only was he older than the others, but his skin was also thicker than theirs. And Murong was in a fluster. Hearing the sound of Chongshan makes me even angrier. He looked at the broken walls and the muddy marks on the ground. He didn't care at all about the scornful looks from the group around him. Now, he only felt that in this seemingly unremarkable little village, there lay a terrifying beast of a flood lurking in slumber. But at that moment, Chongshan suddenly appeared before them. So everyone awkwardly echoed the elder brother's reputation. After Yu Jis' defeat at Shua's hands, not only did she validate their martial arts with him, but she also generously helped him teach the villagers martial arts. Just as old Murong returned to the village entrance with a group of people. Moreover, no one in this stronghold understands the situation in the martial world better than I do. There shouldn't be any problems. But the few younger brothers beside him weren't fools either. Although I think Murong's words sound better than his singing, I can only pin my hopes on him now. I'm just afraid they will eventually become cannon fodders. Thinking of this, that old man Murong laughed awkwardly. He indicated that they had only temporarily left at first. The purpose was also to protect the existence of the stronghold. It seems they should be waiting for us to return. If this continues, he may only be able to choose to establish a stronghold. But the stronghold over there is said to be extremely cruel. Not to mention this group of followers. Even he himself would be in danger if he went. But now it can be confirmed that those guys have not only survived. Under the great reputation, it will only become more powerful than ever. Now, with this group of followers by his side, they are united. No matter what, he must find a way to provide them with a means to survive. But now the situation they are facing is not much different. I originally planned to wait until the Five Peaks stronghold was leaderless. Then I would appear like a savior, naturally take over this small stronghold, and then step by step rise to the ranks of the Deer Forest Alliance. Not only are they hard to believe, but people everywhere around here are saying that Wufeng village not only takes in the old, weak and women, but also provides food and shelter. Yet Murong still cannot believe it. I even suspect that Master Yuji doesn't want to take action personally. He was the first to step forward and say that Wufeng stronghold was doomed. And with a group of people, he is about to part ways with the village. But at this moment, he looks restless. A group of younger brothers surrounds him. They eagerly recount the rumors of recent days. One has schemed thoroughly, yet ends up with nothing, while the other remains unassuming, humble and open-minded. This is clearly evident in these two old men. When Murong Bai learned that the Wudang elder would personally lead an assault on the bandit stronghold, two such people could come together. How did this place become so harmonious and peaceful, like a paradise? And when Ju Mei heard the old man's question, yet he revealed his gentleness. Perhaps it's because the leader truly treats everyone like family. She welcomed everyone. Xiao Shua felt more like a deity here, guarding this stronghold. He was extremely curious about the conditions under which, yet at least in his eyes, this stronghold and its bandits are a truly beautiful place. In his perception, most bandits are ruthless thugs who value human life as grass. But the people here seem to be struggling for survival, having to escape their original lives, and the leader here doesn't seem to mind the trouble. This surprised Yumei greatly. In her eyes, shouldn't a grand elder of Wudang have a lofty demeanor? But the old man is just carrying lumber while chatting casually with ninth sister. He once held a deep prejudice against mountain bandits. The dusk is very beautiful. Yumei conveniently chops wood in the mountains after her training. A large bundle of firewood is no longer a challenge for her. At that moment, the old man suddenly appeared behind her. He took the wood from her hands with one hand. They were no longer what they once were. Meanwhile, back at the village, Besides Su, it seemed everyone else was gradually getting familiar with the old Taoist priest. He appears to be very kind to the children here, and the entire martial world bow beneath my feet, Night Moon Immortal's feet. Half a month later, Shua and the old master were deep in the Wufing Mountains, training, one old, one young, learning from each other. Their progress was remarkable. Not only has your power been restored, but you've also completely surpassed the demon god realm. Upon hearing this, the person simply smiled. 16 years ago, I was indeed too impatient, but from now on, I will make those two who call themselves sword gods. A true demon is quietly being born. I see a man gradually having his soul extracted, slowly transforming into a human shell. The followers nearby were overjoyed at the sight. With their heads lowered, they fervently congratulated the leader. I will also tell you how to comprehend the essence of martial arts. So, Liu Ke, how will you choose? At this moment, deep within the mountains, far from the martial world, I just want to make a deal with you. What I lack is an understanding of this nearly limitless potential of Taiji, and you have the experience to break through. We can complement each other. You give me a bit of advice. If the young man hopes to make further progress, he needs to first understand the basic concepts of martial arts. Seeing the little guy waver, Yujizi increased the stakes again. I don't need you to be my master. The old man proudly retracted his fist. He intentionally or unintentionally reminded Shua that although he possessed immense internal power and had unparalleled sword skills, he seemed to have no concept of controlling and applying his strength. There was no intention of dodgings. Although Yuji's fist did indeed stop half an inch in front of him, what surprised the boy was that the sturdy bamboo behind him was smashed to pieces by the old man's punch, despite being blocked by his head. Seeing the little guy's surprised expression, yet Yuji simply stood up slowly. He first dashed towards the boy, then he threw a punch, but to Shu Arun, he had no intention of attacking him at all. A chance to approach the supreme realm of the Grandmaster. So the great sword saint of Wudang stayed stubbornly in this dear forest martial wind village. But what does Shu know of his longing? He only wants to drive away this dangerous element that no one but himself can subdue. As a result, he has made no progress over the years. However, when he was defeated by the young man's Nine Heavens sword technique, he understood this may be his last chance in this lifetime. A chance to break through his own limitations. It seems the president needs to personally visit Wufing Mountain. He is the strongest disciple of the Wudang sect in a century. 15 years ago, he had already mastered the Tai Chi sword technique to the realm of 4 forms, returning to 2 essentials. But no matter how hard he practiced, he ultimately could not cross this threshold, and even fight and win against Yu Jizi. I don't know if it's true or not, but at that moment, the mysterious minister behind the scenes suddenly made a strange sound. Our dear Forest Alliance summit is approaching. Since that group has such rumors circulating, he reported everything he had heard to the officials. At this moment, the one-eyed man finally remembered. The dear Forest 5 Ceiling Village truly has a reputation it has given itself. I just didn't expect them to survive to this day. I don't mind sharing my grievances with these common folks, but the speaker is unaware, while the listener is attentive. Everything was clearly heard by the man in green nearby. He immediately went straight to the Henan headquarters of the Deer Forest Alliance. At this moment, no one recognized who he was. Curious, they gathered around this man who seemed to know something, and now he spends his days drinking heavily. The impact the youth had on him has already seeped into his bones. The pride I once had is long gone, and that man was the very one whose sword technique was stolen by Shua. Instead, Li Fugi, who was taken out in seconds. In his perception, the strength of the youth is already beyond reach. It is absolutely possible to have a battle with that Yuji Zenran was defeated by them. But these are just rumors. Most people treat them as idle gossip over tea. However, at this tea house, there was a drunk man who, without any reservation, laughed and said it must be true that at this moment, rumors about the 5 peaks and 10 oddities were spreading throughout the cities near Wufeng Mountain. First was the swift sword Mudonglai, then came Li Fugi, the top fighter in Henan. Even J.G. Zenran, who was almost among the top 10 martial artists. When will you be willing to leave? Looking at Shua's impatient expression, Yuji inexplicably felt much more at ease. It's quite a joyful thing to make this little monster itch. They just didn't know, worried that he might do something harmful to his brothers. It was ultimately him who ordered the hundreds of swordsmen to leave. This made it impossible for Shue to take action against the old man. He could only glare fiercely at the Yujizi before him, and ask what he really wanted. I hope my junior brother can return to the mountain immediately for the sect meeting. But upon seeing the letter, Yujizi didn't take it seriously. He casually tossed it into the wind. At that moment, Shue also arrived. Though this little guy was quite concerned about Yujizi's presence. Hearing this, the 4th brother finally felt relieved. He asked about Shue's whereabouts. At that moment, a letter arrived deep in Wufeng Mountain. Though it was advice from the sect leader, it said that staying at the Lulin Alliance's stronghold would have a negative impact on the juniors. None of us are actual villains. When faced with danger, fleeing is instinct. But if they were real villains, they would stab you in the back. Keeping them around is just about having a few more mouths to feed. At that time, someone has to take on the responsibility of watching over the house, right? This is an opportunity we cannot afford to miss if we want recognition. At that time, it won't just be our 10 brothers going. We need to put on a show first. But you see, most of us are just ordinary people. We chose to come to the village seeking refuge for various reasons. Due to oppression, the Lulin Alliance showed no signs of movement. Although I am also quite angry, this only indicates one thing. This organization actually does not acknowledge us, and with the Lulin summit approaching. But Tianyang actually had quite a few thoughts. Once, they had hoped that joining the Green Forest would grant them protection, but in the end, they found that no matter which faction they chose, in the end, it all comes down to your strength. Even though we learned in advance that Master Yuji is coming to attack the stronghold, after expressing gratitude to the village chief, they left the assembly hall. But at that moment, the 4th brother couldn't stand it anymore. He really couldn't understand why such a group of people would still want to stay. When they found the eldest brother, they began to complain. Quan Wai gestured to the visitor that he could come back. This scene left almost everyone looking utterly bewildered. After all, they had chosen to be sworn allies in times of crisis. Yet the village chief forgave them. They were all moved to tears on the spot. This was already the 12th deserter crying and begging to return to the stronghold. They all swore without exception that they would never be driven mad again. As Tianyang raised his hand and was about to strike the other person, he suddenly appeared extremely agreeable. seeing this power that could tear everything apart. The elders understood. No matter how much they resisted, the true master of Wolong Villa would inevitably belong to Bai Yujin. The mountain stronghold has regained its vitality, but the man looked grim. This led to the scene of Liu Yuan standing with his sword in the training arena. Though the sword technique has only this one move left, the imposing presence of the golden dragon standing there made all the elders turn their heads. With a single sword wave, suddenly 3 menacing handprints appeared on the ground. At this moment, Bai Yujin appeared very proud. Over the years, he has managed the Wolong Mountain Villa. Although he holds great power, the old-timers have always been resistant due to the fact that he is a woman. Now his eldest son's 9 Heavens sword technique has already reached great mastery. He himself plans to stay in the 5 Peaks Mountain for a while. Meanwhile, Bai Yujin from the Wolong Mountain Villa in Luoyang City has invited all the elders from the Liu family's older generation. After several years of accumulation, Shua's older brother, Liu Yuan, has already mastered the 9 Heavens sword technique his father entrusted to him in his childhood. She made a surprising decision in her heart, so she called for the Sangwairen, indicating that they could return on their own. As for the 5 Peaks village, it's better to take a detour if possible. After going through the biggest crisis in the history of this village, looking at the satisfied expression of the young man in the village, Yujizi suddenly felt that perhaps she could take another step forward on her martial arts path. After some contemplation, Juame tightly embraced the old demon, crying tears of joy. In an instant, all the gloom was swept away by Shua's strong presence. Tianyang happily lifted the little one, amidst the cheers of the crowd. For a moment, Tianyang softly calls out. Shua fears that all of this is just a dream. It felt as if it could shatter itself, but upon seeing the little one safe and sound, the brothers cheered almost simultaneously. He was the same back then. I understand. This must be my limit. As Yujizi falls to the ground, everyone from both the Righteous Alliance and Wufeng Village is left in shock. As Shua turned back to face the sun, she told Yujizi, "I am Liu Shua, the old wife of Wufeng Village." Upon hearing this, the old man finally revealed a bitter smile. The sword slowly slips from his hand and falls to the ground. "You lost." But Yujizi was completely stunned, yet she felt helpless. She just stood there quietly. After a long while, she struggled to ask, "Can you tell me your name?" He must see this second move, but Shu has already noticed the old man's condition. In this exchange, he did not use the 9 Heavens sword technique again. After injuring his left shoulder, the old man calmly said he had no strength left to fight. A mouthful of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth, but with his willpower, he raised his sword once more. He wants to confront it with one more strike, even if it means falling here. The entire valley was left with 3 terrifying claw marks. The sword Sex Taiji behind Yujizi, who was still unsteady, was already in ruins. At this moment, he was at the end of his strength. His internal energy was exhausted, facing the boy's second sword attack. After more than 10 years of stagnation in his cultivation, he could have such an opportunity. The outcome of this battle no longer mattered to him. The Heavenly Emperor Sword Sect instantly exhausted all its inner strength, and clashed with this unparalleled sword technique, happy to fight him again. He is also very scared. He feared this power that the entire martial world could not resist, but he also felt fortunate. Fortunate that he was so lucky. He no longer looks down on Sue in the slightest. This move in the boy's hand has already cast a shadow in the hearts of countless heroes. This includes Yuji herself. He is very happy. 25 years ago, he experienced what it meant to be weak and powerless before the golden dragon's soul. Now, by some strange twist of fate, he encounters the youth once again. The figure from the past gradually overlaps with the present. At this moment, he finally understands who he is facing in this duel. This is the signature skill of the Sword Saint of the Nine Heavens. Before him was a golden true dragon, looking down at himself with a disdainful gaze that seems to overlook the world. Under a fortune worth thousands, a dragon swimming freely. This is a memory buried deep in the old man's heart, lingering all this time. But before he could feel any regret, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He saw a golden light rising from the swirling dust ahead. Among it, a pair of even brighter eyes were fixed on him. Yujin looked on in disbelief at this terrifying, yet familiar scene. But the dazzling light made it impossible for them to look directly at it. When the impact finally ended, the expected figure was devoid of any joy. This move is the most elite skill of Wudang. It seems that the young man is already dead. At that moment, Shua felt as if the sky was collapsing and the earth was splitting apart. It was extremely difficult to steady herself, but there was no time to react at all. A massive beam of light crashed down to the ground. The crowd, in shock, nearly got swept up in it as well. They stared at the incredible scene before them. Almost simultaneously, they let out gasps of surprise. The old man formed an enormous Tai Chi diagram in the air. With a sweep of his sword, he pointed the sword at the youth. It was better to keep his distance and think of a plan. Just when Shua was contemplating a countermeasure, the opponent first launched a sudden attack with sword energy. Then, unexpectedly, they chose to leap into the air. At this moment, the companions had also arrived, maintaining a considerable distance from the opponent. The young man knew well that he had been too reckless. He took the initiative to get closer. It seemed he was just falling into the opponent's trap, but now there wasn't a good way out. She was struck by Yuji's sword. This scene made Tianyang and the fourth nearly break out in a cold sweat at the same time. But it felt as if something was blocking their throats. Not a single word came out. But at this moment, Shua had already leaped back. I lost track of the other party. As the feeling of oppression came from behind, Shua felt that something was wrong in her heart. She immediately turned around to block this seemingly slow, yet lightning-fast attack. But she was still a step too late. I saw the old man spread his arms wide. Just as the young man was about to strike him, it was as if time and space had shifted. I was instead wounded in the left arm by a sword. After staggering to steady myself, behind him, the Tai Chi and Bagua. It moves almost at will. But Shua lacks practical combat experience. It's impossible to see the depths of this life. I can only rush forward and test it myself. The young man simply points his sword at the sky. It indicates that his martial skills come from the heavens above. At this moment, Yuji doesn't quite understand the deeper meaning, but it seems that the other party really doesn't regard her highly. That is why he has embodied this sword sect of heaven and earth. So, they took the boss and retreated to a distance. After a brief skirmish, Yuji was increasingly surprised, and couldn't help but start to doubt whether he was truly a disciple of the heavenly demon lord. However, upon questioning, after the above moves, Yuji was still unable to gain the upper hand. At this time, Brother Four and the others also heard the sound and rushed over. Seeing that Shua was evenly matched with the opponent, they knew this was not a place where they could intervene. At this moment, Shua's face showed seriousness, but he did not feel that he would be defeated at all. He still insisted that he was stronger than him. This thoroughly infuriated Yuji, who was almost a master of the martial arts world. Although the youth was arrogant, if there's any possibility, she will take them under her wing. Although her students are numerous now, the moment she sees Suirine, he found that those disciples were simply worlds apart in comparison. Plus, the boys recently exhibited extraordinary internal energy cultivation. It's really hard to bear the thought of terminating it at this moment. Yuji is famously protective of her students, in the Wudang sect. That's also because she is tireless in her teaching. Anyone with talent who comes to her attention. Yet with a beaming smile it spoke, "Do you still think you are stronger than me? Originally, I just wanted him to back down. After all, even the Heavenly Emperor Sword Sect cannot freely control their strength." And upon seeing Su here for the first time, he already felt an intense desire for wealth. He has never seen such a fearless junior. He actually thinks he can surpass me. In a fit of rage, he howls. It showcased the Wudang's #1 sword technique. The Taiji sword gazed at the young man. He can truly feel the other's strength. But I should be stronger than him. The youth faces the sword saint of Wudang. The sword pressure of the sword sect is like a solid form pressing down. In the old man's eyes, the two then stood together. It was just a moment. The boy was sent flying by a single sword strike. Although Shua barely steadied himself, he seemed to have figured out some things. But the opponent merely twisted in the wind. With ease, he deflected the unstoppable sword energy from Shu far away. As the mountain behind exploded, Yuji realized that the boy's internal power was a bit exaggerated. She no longer had time to care about the minor character with a sharp tongue. True energy flowed into the blade. In that moment, he unleashed a sword energy toward Yuji. All previous fear and anxiety turned to ashes in an instant. At that moment, he had only one thought. No one could harm his older brother. At the same time, Master Yuji landed on one foot and instantly appeared in front of Tian Yang, who was about to fall. Shu saw that the situation was critical. In an instant, he shattered the ground with a kick. And with Xuan's true energy, she was ready to intercept the opponent's attack. It was just a moment. Tian Yang hadn't reacted yet. The anger wall was blasted open by impacts from both sides, creating a large hole. I also can't let this unreasonable guy tarnish my name. With a roar filled with pure internal energy, he charged straight up into the sky. At that moment, Shua inside the wall sensed something was wrong. Immediately, she let out a similar roar. After a round of mockery, Boss Sang felt a chill down his spine. Sure enough, the master slowly walked forward from behind him. Although I told you not to act impulsively, while Boss Sang of the Righteous Path Alliance was still mocking how this little character dared to show up. Tian Yang smiled sinisterly. Sang Huairan, you pathetic fool. You don't dare to come here to cause trouble yourself, thinking that if you bring your old soon-to-die master, we would be afraid. Although he knew how terrifying the opponent was, he told Su that he was the leader. No matter who the opponent is, it is his duty to stand in front of everyone. But at that moment, the sound of many approaching footsteps outside the village also arrived. The noise only stopped outside the curtain wall. Tianyang knows that this great battle is about to begin. But before Shu could react, he suddenly leaped onto the city wall. So Shu had put away her techniques. Relying on her petite frame, she engaged in combat with her elder brother. It was the early spring chill. The sun was already beading with sweat, and Shu finally felt much lighter in her heart. Let Big Brother help you stretch your muscles. Hearing this, Shu first hesitated, then showed a bright smile. Indeed, more thoughts or unease. It's better to have an exhilarating fight. The little guy with panda eyes still foolishly claims he can't sleep. He looked up at Shu like this. He knew that saying anything was useless. He drew his blade and charged at Shu. Since you can't sleep, and this time, their opponent is so formidable that even a medium-sized sect wouldn't dare to say a word to him. How could anyone possibly feel at ease with this kind of pressure on a young person? As expected, he thought to himself that he had been too careless. He immediately swung his blade towards the newcomer. But once he saw clearly, he realized it was his older brother, Pang Tianya. He knows that everyone has been too reliant on Shua, but no matter how capable the little guy is, he is still just a child. The reputation of the other party tightened the boy's heart even more. Although he was just as exhausted as his brothers, he felt no trace of sleepiness. But at that moment, a figure suddenly appeared behind him. He was instantly startled. When his brothers fell asleep, the little guy secretly came to the front of the camp. The fourth brother hoped for even the slightest improvement. He forced himself to immerse in the sea of stones, forging himself. He really can't let his brothers know how uncertain he feels facing Yuji, a true person. Though the Nine Heavens swordsmanship is profound, he doesn't believe he can defeat the master of the martial world. He can't be certain of victory. Robbery at Wufeng village. The fragrance of the valley is like gold and orchids. For Shu Arath, his life has never been as happy as it is now, even though he is about to face an insurmountable deadlock. But I really hope this moment can last forever. However, everyone didn't rest the whole night. Before we knew it, we had talked until dawn. At this time, hundreds of people in the city followed the cloaked Yuji Zenran towards Wufeng Mountain. I will soon meet my higher self. He'll be counting on all of you from now on. This scene made Shu feel particularly wonderful. Clearly, we might not survive until tomorrow. Yet at this moment, everyone can feel each other's warmth. I don't even understand what this emotion is. That way, there's no need to thank each other. Isn't that right? Chongshan and Hamai looked surprised at this, but Tianyang just burst into laughter. Since that's the case, from today on, we are family, made Nine Sister feel a bit overwhelmed. Suddenly, she spoke up, saying that since everyone is facing life and death together, the boss shouldn't be so stingy. Why don't we all swear brotherhood here? Let's become sworn family members. Next, we still have to take turns keeping watch. But in the end, Tianyang couldn't hold back. He expressed his gratitude to his brothers. He was deeply moved by their trust in him. This sentimental scene. Let's all take a chance on this so-called deadlock. What harm can it do? After a while, with the brothers' help, they quickly raised the curtain wall again. Everyone sat around the fire discussing how to prevent a surprise attack from the other side. This is their home. Leaving Wufeng village, they have nowhere to go. Thinking of this, Yang didn't hesitate anymore. Since that's the case, instead, he showed a bitter smile. He knew that this deadlock was no longer something he faced alone, but he also knew that everyone might end up perishing together. He just understood everyone's feelings, just like Shua said. Only then did he realize everyone was here. At that moment, third brother seemed to seize the opportunity to mock him. Big brother, you didn't really think we'd just leave, did you? Meanwhile, Tian looked up at this scene, stunned for a long time. He didn't even feel that everyone was mocking him. But by then, he had already lost all his strength. Just when he thought he would be crushed to death, fourth brother suddenly appeared in front of him, smiling and saying, "This is what happens when you don't work hard. Now you can't handle it, can you?" Looking at his trembling hands, he realized that he hadn't done any manual work for far too long. It had always been everyone else. At that moment, the rope of the curtain wall suddenly snapped, and it fell straight down towards the ground. They couldn't believe what their leader was saying, but it seemed that fourth brother knew what he was thinking. He said nothing and simply took Shua and the others away from the assembly hall. Yet the always cheerful rough man, Pang Tianyang, wore a gloomy expression until the fire departed. Late at night, he hurriedly built a new curtain wall all by himself. What if I die at the hands of that Yuji Zenran? Wouldn't I regret it for the rest of my life? Thinking of this, he sighed quietly. The sergeant spoke up to inform everyone that the Wufeng village would be disbanded on the spot. The group, who had regained their confidence after Shua's words, suddenly fell silent. He still felt anxious inside. He wasn't wrong. We have all relied too much on Shu Eri. and the enemies this time are far too strong. Shua is still so young. Shua meant that if the Jade Princess wasn't capable of hurting others with her flying leaves and flowers, what reason would there be not to give it a try? The brothers are quite confident in Shua's strength. Everyone seemed to feel much more at ease. But Pang Tianyang remembered the old man's words. No matter how powerful the opponent is, he must never be taken away. The Five Winds stronghold is finished. It has been completely disbanded under this man's decision. Originally, after most people left, this caused several leaves to fall from the eaves, blown by the wind. They slowly landed in Shua's hand. He doesn't know how he compares to that Yuhiji Zenran, but he thinks that at this moment, only he can try his best. And in his heart, this is the only way home. And apologize to everyone with embarrassment. But he is reluctant to part with the village. Moreover, those children should have hope to return here. Thinking of this, he feels that he is too useless as a creditor. He slammed his fist hard on the armrest of the chair. He was reluctant to leave like this. Before long, there were only 10 people left in the hall. Besides Liu and his original 7 brothers. There were also Chong Shan, Jiu Mei, and Hao Mei. At this moment, Tian Yang revealed a bitter smile. No matter how his friends persuaded him, he remained steadfast, though he felt afraid in his heart. But seeing that Jiu Mei had no intention of leaving, Zhong Shi felt uneasy. He turned around and left the stronghold without looking back. Watching this scene, the people in the village began to gradually follow Mirong away. What was unexpected, however, was that Chongshan firmly expressed his desire to stay in the stronghold. In the case of going in different directions, there might still be a chance of not being found. Only with good luck can one salvage this life. His words grew more and more agitated, as if he wanted to cover the turmoil in his heart by spreading fear. That's all he has to say. Even his inner disciples could easily deal with someone like him, a nobody in the martial world. And he came in person. What Ang Li is facing cannot be solved by any tricks or clever means. The only way now is to escape the mountain stronghold. Among them, the old man Murong understood best what the name Yuji Zenran represented. What he said held not the slightest glimmer of hope. In his view, Wufing village was already finished. Yuji was the strongest expert in the current Wudang sect. To avoid the storm for now, meanwhile, everyone else was waiting in the assembly hall for him to take charge. But under these circumstances, his steps felt particularly heavy. After a while, everyone in the hall indeed appeared to be in great chaos. But unexpectedly, the president of the Zhengzhou Zhengdao Alliance branch is Yuji's disciple. And such a prominent figure would actually come in person to lead the team. Facing the overwhelming sense of impending doom, Tian appeared utterly powerless and fatigued in front of his younger brother. He had already sent the women and children back to pack their things. Hearing Shua's voice, he didn't turn around. His tone was filled with fear. Hu Ganyu helplessly told him that Master Yuji would bring people to attack Wufing village tomorrow. She is a super figure, second only to the top 10 masters in the martial world. Seeing that it was getting late, the 3 of them, chatting and laughing, decided to head back to the village. They just didn't notice that the village was unusually quiet. The eldest brother, Tian Yang, stood in front of the village, showing no emotion. Then they came over and started rambling. The little guy blushed with embarrassment. Looking at their starry-eyed expressions, he said, "As long as you practice well, the formula I taught you will work just as well for you as it does for me." At this point, Shua finally mastered the technique from the profound woman mirror. As the 5 golden lotuses opened with her eyes, they scattered in the wind. The 2 looked at Shua, who resembled an immortal. In that moment, they were extremely excited, not caring whether she understood the situation or not. No matter how he practiced in the past, it seemed only for assassination. Yet at this moment, he can no longer distinguish between the two. The two, observing Shua's cultivation, were amazed to see 5 lotus flowers appearing out of nowhere above her head, gradually blooming. They emitted a golden light. He inherits the 9 heavens sword technique. Originally, there were some unspeakable difficulties, but he gained insights while guiding others to rest. Since escaping the old warehouse, Shua has made no progress. He recalls the time practicing swordplay with the figure in the mirror. Determined, he swung the 9 heavens sword technique thousands of times. What they didn't know was that a terrifying piece of news suddenly spread through the village. It enveloped everyone's heart like a catastrophic disaster. The youth is immersed in the vast world, but the scene before me left her stunned. While reminding the newly awakened Hame to keep quiet, he gazed at the boy who was lost in concentration. At that moment, he had somehow lifted off the ground. His mind was completely immersed in a realm of imagination. I also began to refine my mental mantra. It was dusk. Ju-mai opened her eyes drowsily. I felt like I had just woken up from a nap. My spirit was very high. They could only follow Shua's request and concentrate. Gradually, they became completely immersed in it. It was just that the young man was also seeing someone practice for the first time. It seems that some vague things from the past have become clear. I felt something in my heart. For a moment, it felt quite uncomfortable. But to Shu Arun, this was not a difficult task. He indicated that it would only take 10 years of focused practice to master it. However, the two of them couldn't help but feel that his words were not uplifting. When asked by the 4th brother, he simply said he was reminded of some things from the past. Meanwhile, Shua was guiding Ju-mai and Hame on their features, teaching them the 9 heavens mind method through both words and actions. However, the complex incantations made it difficult for them to remember even 3 lines. At this moment, the village is expanding faster than the Imperial Army's conscription. It has also taken in a group of long-oppressed women and children. They even invited the best carpenter in the nearby town to build a gathering place for them. But at this moment, looking at the group of happy children, Tianyang fell silent. But for so many years, there had never been any good or bad omens. Yet today, he unexpectedly drew a top-notch fortune. It seems that he must have significant gains in this endeavor. However, in Wufeng village nowadays, everyone is almost completely immersed in the illusion of being invincible. It will trouble the wetlands to mobilize troops. After learning of the Master Brother's thoughts, Yuji Zenran no longer declined. Instead, she unexpectedly expressed a desire to go in person. He said he would casually draw an oracle at Nanshan Temple on the hillside every day. If we go to war with Dear Spirit Sect now, the suffering of the people will likely lead to the entire martial arts world becoming unprecedentedly weak. At that time, the court will intervene. I'm afraid various sects in the martial world will be forced to unite in the southern city. Many factors will be taken into consideration. What's more concerning is, although the Dear Spirit Alliance isn't as powerful as the demon sect under the Moon Demon, the Moon Demon nearly toppled the entire martial world on his own back then. Who can guarantee such a thing won't happen again? Moreover, we can no longer rely on the 2 great leaders. He knew that the young man who emerged in this way could never be a disciple of that demon lord. But since he is in the Dear Spirit Alliance, it's better to eliminate it as soon as possible. If a war really breaks out, would we still fear that broken demon lord? But at this moment, the leader suddenly appeared extremely wise. In his eyes, he had already understood this matter clearly. It would be the most reasonable approach. However, this matter left Yuchi very confused. In his view, among the top 10 experts now, 9 are busy with the righteous path. If not handled well, I'm afraid the 2 major powers will completely go to war. Because of this, it's quite a coincidence. The person in charge of the Zhengzhou branch is a disciple from the outer sect of this Uchi. If he sends an inner sect disciple to handle this, he called upon junior brother Yuhishi to discuss this issue. It turns out that the relationship between the Righteous Path Alliance and the Deer Spirit Alliance was already maintained in a very fragile balance. If this truly involves that demon Lord Putin, it becomes very different. All the strongholds in the alliance were inaccessible. What stood before them was a red-haired boy suspected to be a disciple of the Broken Sky Demon Lord. It was originally just a regular call for help, but this matter seemed extremely sensitive in the hands of the sect leader, because he drew an excellent fortune at Nanshan Temple. I plan to meet the boy rumored to be from Wufing Mountain. A few days ago, the leader of the Wudang sect received a letter from the Jingzhou branch of the Righteous Path Alliance. It said that near Wufing Mountain, thinking of this, he felt he had struck gold. The superior fortune of Nanshan Temple is indeed effective. It really brought him such good luck. This is an old man who is almost a martial arts master, yet he came from 1,000 miles away to Jingzhou. At that moment, the departing Yuji Zen Ren told his utterly confused, foolish disciple that the young man could not possibly be the disciple of the Demon Lord. If he had such an outstanding disciple, surely it will show off to the world. How could it be hidden away in this small Wufing mountain? He is willing to do it all. Seeing that Shua had fallen for it, Ju Mai finally revealed a triumphant expression. She indicated that as long as he taught her and Hame martial arts, he could settle everything for Shua. She even covered Hame's mouth to prevent her from denying it. She continued to pressure him, saying the brothers in the village also wanted to bring back some cured meat, but that would all be in vain. Finally, the young man couldn't take it anymore. He timidly asked Ju Mei if there was any way to solve this. No matter what it was, they must not cause trouble. Seeing Shua growing increasingly flustered, Ju Mai immediately told him again. Hame had been looking forward to this for a long time. She wanted to buy a new outfit when they went down the mountain, desiring to see the boy looking awkward and helpless. Suddenly, Ninth Sister had an idea. She took out the coins given by Fourth Brother. While saying this little money isn't enough to compensate the tavern, she also mentioned that Fourth Brother specifically reminded her to expand recruitment for the village. As Shua looked at the old man's back, he felt quite confused. What exactly is this feeling? At that moment, the two sisters Jume walked out of the terrifying cave, angrily complaining that Blood's destruction was too severe. He saw it all from a distance. He would never mistake that person. He immediately shouted to his master, "It's him." But Master Yuji paid no attention to his words at all. She turned around and was about to leave, making him feel an impending threat. At this moment, Big Brother Sang also arrived at the scene. He immediately spotted the red-haired youth from Wufing Mountain. Although he didn't know why he was in Zhengzhou, he clearly remembered the battle with Li Fugi that day. Had an aura that seemed extremely pure and bright. He certainly didn't think the other possessed extraordinary sword skills. This boy should be an exceptionally talented martial arts material, but in Shua's eyes, the aura emanating from this old man was extremely ominous. The red-haired boy suddenly appeared in front of him. At the same time, the boy noticed his gaze. In the instant, their eyes met. Both had some judgments in their hearts. The boy in the eyes of the real person. In the end, he knew he couldn't escape this disaster. However, compared to having to deal with Wufing Mountain, he would rather sincerely honor the master afterward to seek forgiveness. At that moment, when he encountered the real person, the wall of the inn beside him was suddenly smashed through by a strong man. But more than that, he's scared. What would his master think? One could see the master striding forward without looking back. He had still hoped that the master hadn't heard him, but a distant voice that floated over made him realize afterward that he would return to Wudang Mountain to meditate. He's afraid he might lose this person too. So he invited a master who was once among the top 10 martial artists in the world. Isn't this overkill for a pig? In every alley, people are getting more and more excited as they talk. Although Boss Sang feels angry listening to them, they have no idea what it's like. This news, not to mention Zhengzhou, even Wudang Mountain, has already spread. All the gossip in the city is circulating. The president of the Zhengdao Alliance's branch is cowardly and short-tempered. Look, even Li Fugi can't defeat others. However, she unexpectedly encountered the Wudang elder, Master Yuji. After learning that he had arrived in Zhengzhou, Boss Sang hurried to the west of the city to welcome him, but he didn't give his useless apprentice a good face at all. A mountain bandit actually wants to specially invite him to handle things. That the two people who shouldn't have met now unexpectedly encountered each other in this farce. The simple and cheerful girl set a trap for the young man. In order to help her sister escape from the embarrassment of being forced into marriage by a rogue, Shua kicked the other person out of the tavern without holding back at all. Should have had the noise of many dishes shattering, but a cloaked man stomped his foot, and everything was silenced. At this moment, Shua realized that there was indeed an unusual old man beside him. What they didn't know was, "So you haven't left yet?" Before he could even start to explain, he was kicked out by Shua. He forcefully opened another door for the inn, the side door, aside from the sound of the broken wall. That they are from Wufing village, and this person opposite us is our 7th master. Hearing this, his mind suddenly felt like a bolt from the blue. The young man across had already slowly stood up and counted to the last number. For the girl's sake, he just coldly says, "You've never even heard of Bozai from Heijia village. Which family are you little kids from?" Jumai was gnawing on a big soup dumpling that might soon be gone, while telling this foolish rogue to disappear from his sight. The bald guy hasn't realized the seriousness of the situation yet. He only finds it funny that he's being threatened by a kid. But he is indeed quite fond of Hami, though extremely annoyed. In broad daylight, he placed his hand on Hami's shoulder. His sweet words were endless. At that moment, a young voice suddenly came from the side. "Seeing that today is a good day, give him a count of 10. Now, who in the entire Henan province doesn't know our boss, the 7th Ming? Kindly advise him to quickly get lost. Don't wait until you lose your life to regret it." But the rogue seemed to hear nothing. This scared her so much that she broke into a cold sweat. But Jumai seemed utterly speechless. She herself had once been sold to a brothel and escaped to the village. She was fully aware of the lewd thoughts in that big man's mind, but he really had no sense at all. Just then, a bald, muscular man suddenly walked into the restaurant. Seeing them, he looked very pleased. He slowly walked up behind the two girls. He ominously said to Hame, "Do you know how worried I am about you?" Hame realized that the marriage-pushing scoundrel had found her. The disciple is in trouble. It should be almost time for them to arrive in Zhengzhou. I want to see how long this little thief can keep bouncing around. Meanwhile, the few of them enjoying their joyful time are completely unaware. The boss Sang finally had someone prepare the Longjing tea he had brought back from Shihu. He had already sent it to his master a month ago. Although he is not the most powerful elder in Wudang, he is among the top 10 masters in the martial world. Moreover, he is very protective of his disciples. Looking at Big Brother Sang's bloodied fist, the others finally realized they had misspoken. If the news that the Righteous Alliance is going to surround the bandit stronghold gets out, it would be even worse than being robbed by the bandits. Seeing that everyone was waking up, the more they talked, the more they felt their speculation was correct. Given the Dark Lord's intimidation, some even proposed to avoid Wufing Mountain during the escort. Hearing this, Minister Zheng from Zhengzhou was so furious that his scalp tingled. He punched the case in front of several people, smashing it. Expanding influence will be as difficult as climbing to the sky. The people in the Jingzhou branch have even started to speculate that red-haired boy is incredibly strong, like a monster. If he is a disciple of the demon lord of breaking heaven, everything suddenly makes sense. The Righteous Alliance has almost all its strongholds near Wufing Mountain taken down by that young man. They were originally the outposts set up by various sects and families across the country. They are more like renowned escort agencies that provide services for local merchant associations. If this continues, I'm afraid the reputation of the Righteous Alliance in Henan province will be ruined. The fourth boss specially gave me a bag of money. He said I must take you out to relax. Eat until you can't eat anymore. Play until you can't move, and only then can you return to the village. But some are happy while others are worried. His month-long patrols have made the whole village extremely prosperous. The number of people has expanded compared to the past, and the youngest sister is famous in the village for being sweet and charming. I escaped to the mountain stronghold because I was forced into marriage by the rogues. I was just in time to be rescued by Jumei, who helped me with the work. For a moment, they had no choice but to change the subject. He didn't understand why they suddenly had to wander around the city so lavishly. Just this first restaurant in Jingzhou looked like something he and his brothers could never afford in their past poverty. Hearing this, the ninth sister got excited. As for the seventh brother, however, at this moment, the young master, surrounded like a moon surrounded by stars, appeared particularly awkward. Since the incident, he had been bullied and mistreated by those closest to him. They paid him no mind at all. While the older brothers in the village cared for him, he had never experienced the open admiration of girls before. The wooden wall that everyone had worked hard to build. They were the pinnacle of beauty among the female bandits, yet they all rushed to be the young master's personal maid. Even the newly arrived, Amei felt a long-standing connection with him. The bright and beautiful new clothes were chosen after much deliberation to dress Yuerei. When Sue returned to the village, everyone admired him even more. Only a few older brothers were more concerned about whether he was hurt. When they learned that the little guy was fine, they were going to knock his head for destroying. In his eyes, this person was too weak. There was really no compelling reason to kill him. However, everything in this scene was captured from afar by an unknown spy. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he had just seen. After a long silence, he disappeared without a trace from the cliff. He begged the young hero to spare him. He vowed never to approach Wufing village again, fearing that the other party wouldn't believe him. He even swore a toxic oath. After pondering for a moment, Shue allowed him to leave with his people, and the other side had already fallen. These words caused Li Fugi, who was lying on the ground, to spit out another mouthful of blood. He didn't know where this monster had come from, but upon hearing that the other party was going to slit his throat, he was so scared that he lost all his arrogance. He completely lost his combat ability. He couldn't understand why all of the opponent's after images were just like the real body, and why, after just seeing it once, he had already surpassed his own level. And Shue looked at the invader boy, who had been instantly incapacitated by him. He complained without restraint that he hadn't even finished his performance yet. He used exactly the same move, but in the face of battle, he simply didn't have time to be shocked. He focused his mind and began to search for the boy's true body. But in the next moment, after returning to Henan, he quickly became the top expert here. This has always been his source of pride. However, all of this instantly vanished with the subsequent changes in Chue's moves. The youth merely watched him demonstrate once. In his view, this Qingfeng 13 style was merely a precursor to the Huashan Plum Blossom Divine Sword. But among this generation of disciples, he is the only junior who has comprehended its mysteries. Yet, ironically, he is merely an outer sect disciple. However, After the little bald head's reminder last night, Shue had developed a great interest in the application of this martial arts. He imitated the other person's stance. Li Fugi, who saw this scene, was taken aback, but he didn't realize just how terrifying the other party truly was. But the young man seized the moment. With one strike, he blocked all attacks. At that moment he realized, apart from his main body, they were all just afterimages. He pulled out the equipment and headed towards Su Eren. Raising his hand, he unleashed his most proud and famous skill, the 13 styles of the clear wind. Suddenly, Li Fugi's figure in the air trembled. He conjured 4 identical phantoms of himself, each moving differently. Together, they launched an assault on Su Eren. Causing trouble on your own turf comes with a price. So when are we going to fight? Hearing this made him grind his teeth in anger. After finally coming back, his mind fell into madness again. Just based on that one move, it must not be simple. But Li Fugi's arrogance prevents him from leading 100 or so people to hunt a kid. For a moment, I didn't know what to do, but Shue didn't care about his thoughts. At this moment, facing the seemingly careless Li Fugi, he has already regarded the other party as a dead man. Seeing the boy remain unmoved, he feels a severe headache. Although he doesn't know the other's depth, not to mention Li Fu, who is taking advantage of the chaos to defend his own stronghold. However, under the guidance of his elder brother, Pang Tianyang, Shue has firmly decided that Wufing Mountain is their private property. Since no lives have been harmed, collecting a toll for passage is certainly deserved. This person was a monster that crawled out of hell. Now, he didn't know whether Shue was good or bad. He is becoming more and more like a demon cultivator. But within the Righteous Path Alliance, there is the bloodthirsty Bai Yujin, who belongs to Bab, and there is Mu Donglai, who intends to exterminate him completely. The impact from the boy's strike was immense. His entire palm and wrist were nearly unable to grip. After that brief exchange, Li Fugui, the husband, looked at the slowly approaching boy and felt a deeply unreal sensation. The wall suddenly exploded outward. A young man suddenly appeared, and with a swift motion, he slashed at him. Although he reacted on the spot, the moment their blades clashed. Otherwise, he would have brought all this knowledge and fury for nothing. This left over 100 people standing outside the village all night. Yet, they didn't even manage to enter the village gates. In the future, this will surely become a laughingstock for everyone in the Righteous Path Alliance. Just as he was about to break through with brute force, he didn't hold back at all. It was a brutal assault. In his mind, which was usually quite sharp, only one thought remained at this moment. It was imperative to destroy this facade as quickly as possible. He immediately shouted for his brothers to take out bows and arrows to block him from breaking the wall. However, at this moment, Shue walked slowly forward with a broad knife. Everyone was momentarily unsure of what the seventh master was planning to do. But the murderous intent he exuded at this moment made everyone present too afraid to speak up. At this moment, Li Fugi had already arrived in front of Muqiang. Even if he has high martial arts skills, he will still fall into danger. At this moment, the old man Murong in the stronghold saw Li Fugi through a crack in the wall. His expression was extremely unpleasant. He knows how formidable the opponent is. The curtain wall would definitely be breached completely under his axe in no time. So one person with an axe slowly walked toward the curtain wall. But the two younger brothers behind him were even more frightened. Although this division leader is young and capable, his attitude is a bit too arrogant. If this matter gets out of hand, it was as if he could already hear the mocking and whispering of the swordsman behind him. Just think of him, the dignified Li Fugi, the backbone of the Righteous Path Alliance, was sabotaged by a group of wild brutes. With no other choice, I had to stubbornly assert that everything is still under control. But when he raised his eyes to look, His expression instantly froze in place, looking at the tall wooden wall 100 meters away inside the gate. He felt a burning sensation on his face. His whole body trembled with anger. He looked particularly gloomy after a night of extinguishing the flames. The men outside already showed expressions of certain victory, as they used grappling hooks to destroy the already fragile rubber wood. The little brother beside him seized the opportunity and flattered him endlessly. With corpses and wood in a place out of arrow range, sprinkle water around to prevent the fire from spreading. At this moment, everyone truly realized the cunning bravery of their leader. Without a word, they quickly picked up their weapons and built a second line of defense. But at this time, Shua was lost in thought. He shouted without hesitation for everyone to stay calm. If we rush out and fight desperately now, we will only be caught off guard by the enemy. After a quick thought, he immediately directed the brothers to build a second wall. Tian Yang, who had been fast asleep, heard the commotion. With panda eyes, he opened the door to take a look, and the scene instantly woke him up. He knows that the direct line is not terrifying. Stabilizing the brothers is the top priority. Just as he was lost in thought, a scream came from behind him. When he turned to look, he saw a sea of flame-wielding swordsmen rushing into the camp. In an instant, everyone was thrown into chaos. Like Lucy's flying flowers, even leaves could harm people. This made Shua extremely interested. But aside from the internal classics he didn't understand any other methods of using internal power. For a moment, he felt a great headache. The village already seems very peaceful. At this moment, the little bald head found blood. Although he still had a pus-filled bruise on his face from being beaten by him, the flattery he received was more and more brilliant. However, when he talked about some profound internal skills, he is a punching bag for his family, yet he is a treasure to his brothers. Although his old wife accidentally acquired unparalleled swordsmanship in an abandoned warehouse, she respects these 6 brothers, who regard her as their own more than anyone else. Liao Keochunan is unstoppable because his wife is in charge. Even if they all had the same skills as Old Liang, it would be impossible to withstand so many skilled fighters. For him, it was just a momentary whim, but in front of others, he still wields his sword under the pretense of righteousness, aiming at Wufeng Mountain. It's just that he could hold the position of the big boss. It is not solely relying on the back door. With caution, he still chose to gather over 100 martial artists from the alliance. At this point, he felt it should be foolproof for a stronghold of this scale. Although he couldn't be bothered to put effort into such a campaign, since Old Liang is in the stronghold, that's a different matter. Upon learning this, the stronghold has fewer than 30 people. He felt it would be easy to capture. But upon inquiry, he discovered that the head of the bandit group had not changed yet. This intrigued him greatly. In recent months, he had also received several commissions from the government to eliminate bandits. In his view, the Orthodox Alliance and Deer Forest have always been incompatible. The 2 old men who had disappeared for several months appeared in the Wufeng Mountain Deer Forest bandit group. The person sitting there upon hearing this seemed incredibly pleased. He had long known that the 2 old guys harbored resentment because he had taken their division leader's position. However, he never expected that they would choose to join the Deer Spirit Alliance. It was still that obscure little bandit group. In a moment of desperation, I chose to immediately and respectfully admit my mistake to the boss. What was originally a disaster for Tian Yang turned into a farce. It ended with Shua's silly grin. After spring arrived, the village returned to its previous harmonious life of searching the mountains. But at this time, the Righteous Alliance's little brothers in Luoyang suddenly came to report. At that moment, old Mu Rong was completely frightened. The boy before him was definitely a monster. The old man's martial arts are not any worse than my own. In the end, he was still knocked out cold by this guy with his bare hands. Though I was unwilling, I was also injured by the iron fan. It was then that I realized he was quite cunning. Seeing that there was still one person left, I picked up the broad knife and planned to take the next round. I looked at the boy who was slowly approaching. In the end, Xiaoxue decided to also give up her weapon. But now he was completely different from a few months ago when dealing with Chongshan. He had already understood that the martial arts he learned in the Xuannu realm were quite profound. For a moment, he didn't take the two of them seriously at all. Although I did manage to knock down that old dog who calls himself the second of the three madmen. One of them suddenly had a clever idea. He chuckled and took out the iron fan, telling the little guy that he didn't have a habit of using weapons. Besides, we are family. It's said that swords and knives have no eyes. Spittle flying everywhere. This scene left both old men dumbfounded. The frustrated young man glared at them fiercely. To them, Shua's arrogance felt like a nail driven into their chests. They were filled with indignation. And now they found themselves in a difficult position. To bolster my courage, I had to shout a few times at Shu Eru. However, it was not unexpected. That shout knocked out his front teeth. From then on, both the little bald man and the uncle were carefully taken down to the point of fainting by Shu Eru. I wanted to push it off for a bit, but suddenly, I was pushed out. At that moment, the boy seemed incredibly imposing to me. I felt like I was facing a formidable army. I was sweating profusely. The young man, reborn, truly displayed an unbeatable force. It scared the old man Murong, who was known as one of the three madmen, so much that his heart raced. Looking at the young man's momentum, they realized that they seemed to have a slight problem being alone. Under the pressure, they encouraged the young man who came with them to take the lead. At that moment, it perfectly aligned with the little one's wishes. Chei slowly walked towards the empty peak as if in a trance. Although I was thinking about third brother's warning not to injure anyone, I coldly said to them, which dog wants to come first? But the provocation from those 5 old men on the day of the ranking battle was just too much. This left Tian Yang feeling frustrated. However, he knew that those old men were indeed very skilled. In desperation, he had no choice but to bring Shua out again. He stated that the ranking battle could start with old 7 in order. He changed from his usual rebellious demeanor during patrols, and kindly reminded Shua to learn to balance tension and relaxation. After getting through this cold winter, someone still needs to patrol the mountains. He really doesn't want to become a fierce demon at such a young age. Third brother unexpectedly appeared very indifferent. While complaining, the older brother taught the 7th how to lose his temper. If I hadn't witnessed it myself, I would fear that the newcomers might not make it through the new year in one piece. He called out to him. Upon hearing third brother's voice, Sua's expression immediately changed. He responded softly. After learning about those guys' gossip and the little one's thoughts, no one could disparage her brothers. She gazed at the boy, so different from usual, angrily brandishing a kitchen knife as she headed towards the newly built wooden house. It just so happened that third brother ran into 7th brother returning home from the palace. Noticing that 7th brother seemed to have something on his mind. Looking back, the entire table along with the cutting board was split in half by his anger. In what was once a harmonious life, he truly didn't know that in Shua's eyes, the village wasn't big. He could clearly hear the whispers of the newcomers. Carelessly, he started to vent his frustrations at the simple boy beside him. But when Shua heard those people slandering his brothers, Ju Mai suddenly heard a loud bang. Although Ju Mai has gained a group of little brothers, they are all rough men. So he took the initiative to take charge of the firewood. From time to time, he also pulled the easygoing Shua to help, but he seemed particularly irritable at that time. Moreover, the few of them are already quite capable. It's just that the Zhengdao alliance has been growing stronger in recent years, which makes them seem insignificant. After the village suddenly increased from 10 people to 25, the miscellaneous work became even more burdensome. He is obviously just a facade of strength. After thinking it over, they decided to use the small stronghold as a springboard to further their ambitions in Lulin Meng. In any case, the rule in Lulin is that the strong are respected. After several mountain patrols, according to their observations, although the seventh brother's martial arts are impressive, the rumors of him defeating Mu Donglei are likely exaggerated. As for Pang Tianyang, his aura is clearly weak. For a time, the entire village appeared to be thriving in both scale and popularity. In the blink of an eye, winter had arrived. Everyone had thought that, after much effort, they could enjoy a warm spring. But at this time, the few individuals who were already wild and difficult to tame began to stir. They secretly plotted to pressure the village leader to reopen the ranking battles. Suddenly, rumors spread that a powerful Luling stronghold had appeared on Wufing Mountain out of nowhere. Any merchant caravan passing by, regardless of its size, would inevitably suffer losses to avert disaster. Even the extremely tough Mu Donglei had been at a disadvantage in their hands. So some people, including a few of them, came here out of curiosity. One by one, they respectfully paid their respects to the mountain. They were originally small cadres in the Orthodox Alliance, feeling frustrated and unaccomplished. They had long harbored thoughts of rebellion. However, there were very few wealthy families and green forest organizations in Luoyang. The few of them had never been able to find a good opportunity. But a few months ago, the old man is coughing like a pig in front of the boss, while mocking this counterfeit boss for his empty show of strength and incompetence. He boldly claims that today he will take the position of the chief of Wufeng Mountain. Meanwhile, the old guys beside him are smirking, as if they are already certain of the outcomes. However, Tian Yang and the fourth brother fell into silence. They knew that their sword techniques were merely third-rate moves. It's scary how much destruction this thing can cause. The problem probably lies with this old seven. They have just realized that what they picked up is not just an ordinary little beggar. This scene scared his brothers just as much as it did the Mudong. But since they were brothers, they soon cheered and rushed toward the bloodied area. They eagerly begged the seventh brother to teach them this sword technique. The admiration from the younger sister made the little guy extremely shy, so much so that even the little sister couldn't help but cover her mouth in shock. But that wasn't all. Each move of the demon banishing sword technique was performed flawlessly. In the end, the sword energy burst forth vividly. The projectile struck a large tree several meters away, creating a penetration wound. But he didn't think it was a problem. So she gladly accepted his request. Just as everyone arrived at the back mountain, the little guy had already taken a stance for the demon-banishing sword technique. But the aura he emitted was incredibly fierce. He grabbed Shu'er and asked him if that really was the demon-slaying sword technique from the fourth brother. After getting a definite answer from the little guy, he found it even more unbelievable. So he suggested that the seventh brother demonstrate the demon-slaying sword technique in front of everyone. Shu'er didn't understand his elder brother's intentions. But what he didn't know was that the brothers who witnessed this scene were far more shocked than the minor gains from their patrol. After returning to the village, Tian Yang couldn't help it anymore. They only hoped not to be held accountable for their foolish actions. Upon seeing this, Shu'er finally revealed a radiant smile. The joy of finally being able to help his brothers couldn't help but make him feel very happy. If the other had intended to kill with that sword, he would have probably already met his ancestors. Thinking of this, he no longer cared about face saving. He immediately fell to the ground, indicating that he was willing to give up twice the amount of bandits. Just now, the boy had used the slightest movement to escape his attack range. Moreover, That sword's power was probably the legendary sword force. He felt the blood seeping from his neck as he watched the young man approaching step by step. A chilling sense crept into his heart. This scene left everyone stunned, unable to react. Tianyang and the fourth, who were about to rush in to save him, were also dumbfounded. At this moment, the subtle pressure emanating from Shu Era caused the leaves in the valley to be thrown into chaos. Only then did Mu Donglai barely react. The sudden attack caught his brothers completely off guard. As they saw the long sword about to strike Shu Erin, everyone held their breath. Then they heard a loud bang. Mu Donglai's sword actually turned into scrap metal. He thought that his brothers were probably just too lazy to make a move. However, everyone's thoughts were different. Tianyang and the fourth brother were completely flustered. Mu Donglai felt that the little guy on the opposite side was extremely mocking. In a fit of anger, he raised his long sword and charged at the boy. Although his assessment wasn't wrong, that Mu Donglai was already ranked among the top 50 experts in the vast martial world. But these days Tianyang didn't know, and Shua even less so. In the eyes of the young boy, the opponent's swordsmanship didn't seem strong. However, under the careful guidance of his brothers in the gang, at this moment, Shua has already learned to show his fangs to outsiders. Looking at this suddenly bloodthirsty Lao Chi, Tianyang couldn't feel any happiness this time. He knew that the swordsman opposite him was not someone he could handle alone. No one can mock us at Woofing Mountain. He is a simple boy filled with resentment, though he has the mind of a 6-year-old. He unexpectedly mastered the Nine Heavens sword technique from the Shuan Numira, but he doesn't know just how strong he is now. This kind of person doesn't need help from my brothers. Since he is here, I naturally have to actively lend a hand. So I walked alone towards that Mudong, and coldly said, "Uncle, you're in big trouble now," thinking that when the fight breaks out, the fourth must protect him to escape. But at that moment, the youth suddenly appeared before everyone, holding a knife. In Shu's eyes, his swordsmanship may be fast, but there are many flaws. Once again, they mocked this group of people. They are even worse than useless. Seeing him in such a strong stance, it made Tianyang anxious. It was the first time bringing the seventh out to patrol the mountains, and they encountered a tough opponent, but the other party simply dodged. Surprisingly, he used his swift sword to slice the arrows one by one. This scene made them feel as if they were seeing a ghost. They couldn't believe their eyes. This only made the other party's momentum even more intimidating. But since they were Deer Forest's thieves, but then there would be no reason to let them leave alive. And Tianyang also noticed that the other party seemed to be somewhat covered in deer fur. Being able to catch crossbow bolts with bare hands must mean he's an expert. Thinking of this, he immediately ordered his brothers to shoot. A bunch of pests worse than mere pests. Looking at the group from Tianyang in front of him, they introduced themselves as the Deer Forest. They even demanded 50 taels from the merchant group as a toll to pass. Mu Donglai felt that this person had lost his mind. It was aimed directly at the leader's knee. Fortunately, it was caught mid-air by this Uncle Ma. It seemed clear that the attackers intended to intimidate, but he still sneered, despicable and shameless. Bandits are just bandits. Although I heard there are only a few small-time players here, claiming territory. The caravan leader couldn't sleep all night because the goods being transported were extremely important. For safety's sake, he even spent a fortune hiring a well-known mercenary named Mudong to escort them. At that moment, a sudden arrow attack came, so as not to let them down. The eager fourth brother, who longs to teach the sword technique, notices something different. In the past, several brothers had begged him to pass on this martial art, but he was unwilling. It seems that the fourth brother has shown much more care for Shu Erin. The next day, the caravan happened to pass by Woofing Mountain. Then it won't be just ordinary powerful. and in the eyes of the young, although he doesn't understand whether the exorcism sword technique is powerful or not, he knows that his brothers treat him very well. Naturally, he must gather all his energy to learn well. If both you and Old 8 use weapons, you might not win so easily, but you don't have to worry. I will teach you my exorcism sword technique. But then the fourth brother reminded him again. The sword blade is a very dangerous thing. If you can't focus your mind, you could easily get hurt by it. So, in this competition, saying that the elder brother bought it for him out of his own pocket from the blacksmith shop in town, they all noticed that Shua seems to be better at using weapons, and in the future, patrolling the mountains will indeed require this thing to be more imposing. This really made the little guy very happy. He looked at the silly Shua with relief. Congratulations to him for keeping his position as the seventh. In the evening, the fourth brother found him and threw a broad knife into his hands. One by one, they questioned whether Chongshan had any hidden illness. Even the seventh brother had no reason to knock out such a formidable opponent in the market. It was just that Tian Yang thought it was too lazy to get tangled up in cause and effect. Chongshan fainted. This scene surprised Shua as well, but he knew he had won. His brothers were still in a daze at this moment. They couldn't make sense of what just happened, channeling true energy towards his opponent. Fortunately, he hadn't mastered the technique yet. Otherwise, with that punch, his brothers would probably have to find someone else to join them. It was just a moment, and this little frame of his seems only to have suffered minor wounds. Yet even Shua himself is unaware of just how much power he possesses now. But he didn't understand how to use the 9 heavens true chi from the mystic mirror. Yet he knew how hard-won everything he had gained was. Instinctively, he turned his fist into an icy blade. How could a young man who knows the etiquette of sharing allow others to easily take from him? In this matter, he is filled with surprise and confusion. Just now, with the way he threw that punch, even a strong man would need to find a doctor for his injuries. Shua had lived like a sandbag. Although it didn't show much on the surface, there wasn't a single good patch of skin on his body. He had finally managed to experience days when others cared about him. Even birds and beasts understand the importance of protection. The young man was probably the only peerless master who was beaten out. He was pressed to the ground by the warrior for the length of a stick of incense. Yet he got back up, still carrying the scars of battle. What he didn't know was that since the beginning of his memory, it seemed everything should be over now. He just needed to find Tian Yang for the position of Lao 7. But at that moment, a very ominous voice suddenly came from behind him. "I will never give up that position. Let's stand until the end." Just moments ago, he had such excellent footwork. How could he suddenly be beaten without any power to retaliate? After a while, Chongshan felt tired himself. Only then did he stop his movements. He was panting heavily, but the other party was a soldier returning from the battlefield. This punch made him extremely angry. He immediately pinned him to the ground. He kept hammering down on him, punch after punch. This scene left Tian Yang dumbfounded. He had hardly ever tried using his fists. His distorted martial arts approach left him confused. He didn't know how to respond. He could only clench his fists and smash them fiercely into Chongshan's face. This made the others' hearts rise to their throats. At that moment, Shua suddenly squatted down, immediately closed in and swung. It was then he realized he had no weapon in hand, aside from practicing swordplay in the warehouse. This scene made Shua's brothers exceptionally happy. They were actually very fond of the little guy. Over the past 6 months, he had been hard-working and selfless. But then, Chongshan threw a punch at him. At that moment, the brothers finally saw in the little guy's eyes a battle they had never witnessed before. What they didn't know was just how important everything was to Shua now. He said he wasn't willing to have even the slightest thing taken away from him. But at this moment, Shua fell into silence. It's hard to see what he's thinking for a moment. He just silently clenched his fists. Slowly, he walked toward the open ground. He stood face to face with Chongshan, deciding the position of the old wife. Although this sounded funny to Tian Yang, it didn't stop him. He also wanted to see if the little guy had developed any guts. After staying in the mountain village for more than half a year, in the bandit group, ranking is based on how long you've been here. So from now on, Shua can also go patrolling the mountains with them. However, the new arrival, Chongshan, found this very displeasing. He doesn't want to be the little brat's underling. He immediately expressed his desire for a competition with him. Someone has also gotten into trouble. There are also girls who escaped after being sold to brothels. It seems that this village is quite inclusive in the Green Forest. Suddenly, Lao Si pressed Shua's head and congratulated the youngest and, from now on, there will also be younger brothers. Shu is simple-minded. He just hopes that one day he can help his brothers. After another month, 3 strong men came to join the brothers on the mountain. They seek wealth to support their families. They also began to actively patrol the mountains, but they still didn't bring Shua along. The young man has been here for these days. He is getting more and more efficient at his work. In his spare time, he goes to the back mountain to practice swordsmanship. When the brothers came to their senses, they only felt that the path in the village had widened. That night, they got completely drunk with their brothers. As they saw their brothers so happy, Shua also looked particularly cheerful. So, while they looked for people to join them, in less than 2 months, this small rundown stronghold should be gone. By then, when the higher-ups investigate, they won't even know what kind of stronghold this used to be. Everything is whatever those 2 brothers say. The merchant convoy will at most just teach them a lesson. But if it's the bandits from Lulin, they would actually go all out to prevent being discovered by Lulin and drawing trouble to themselves, even if they join the Deer Spirit Alliance. To hear that they can easily enter the largest force in the martial world today, Tian Yang still hasn't reacted, but the 2 of them have even more malicious intentions. They know that if it's just ordinary petty thieves, the number of mountain battles in their hands is extremely limited. If the boss were to blame them, they might end up losing an arm or a leg. After thinking it over, I can only ask them to quickly gather 10 people. It led to an all-out war between the Righteous Alliance and them. In the end, it was more trouble than it was worth. But only leaders like them can see through these matters clearly. However, as the organization grew, performance evaluations emerged even then. Upon discovering they had only 6 strong men and a young boy, it was especially disappointing. Although the merchant teams near Luoyang are particularly difficult to cultivate, the surrounding hills of Wufing Mountain have nearly no bandits, and even the tougher bones like Deer Forest would not commit such a massacre for a few little brothers. In hopes of avoiding retaliation and the destruction of their family, such a reputation. The brothers of Tianyang have long admired this, and this time, finally, an official came to inspect the situation of this small stronghold, making the entire Deer Spirit unprecedentedly powerful. Its influence subtly surpasses that of the Orthodox Alliance. It is said that the bandits who join them can always rob without shedding a drop of blood. Whenever a merchant caravan hears its people from Deer Spirit, they obediently offer large sums of money. Has never been successfully dealt with by the Righteous Alliance in their repeated campaigns. Soon, people began to call him the Demon Lord of the Breaking Sky. He became the top among the 10 greatest experts in the martial world. Even the remnants of the demon sect came seeking him. It was all absorbed by the Deer Spirit. At this time, the followers of the demon sect cannot find a place to settle down. At the same time, a monstrous man emerged from nowhere. He called himself the Blade of the Deer Forest. With just his own strength, he nearly unified all the bandits, and this power alone. In desperation, we sought help from the officials of the Deer Spirit Alliance, and it is rumored that they are notorious bandits. Just their name alone can strike fear into people's hearts. Since the death of the Moon Demon, the entire martial arts world has been dominated by the Righteous Alliance, formed by the 7 major sects and 2 prominent families. Yet they are relatively sturdy. They claim to be kings of the mountain, but each time they patrol the mountains, they only seek to collect tolls from passing caravans. They are often bullied by the guards of the caravans. As a result, we are now so poor that we can barely afford food. This group of bold brothers needs to kneel and welcome. The young man was deceived into joining a den of thieves, yet he appears quite satisfied. But those gathered are merely a group of ordinary people forced into this. Their martial skills are not high. Is it ironic that this young master from a prestigious family felt satisfaction in life for the first time only after becoming a bandit? But one day, 2 very arrogant people suddenly showed up. I don't know why. From then on, Shue began his new life in this mountain stronghold, learning a lot of knowledge he had never encountered before. And how can that big pot of rice be cooked so that 7 people won't go hungry? It's just that occasionally, the older brothers come back, battered from outside. This makes Shue feel very worried. Although Tianyang was surprised, he didn't think much of it. He just felt the young man was full of energy, a good candidate for the job. If he performs well, he could also be taught some self-defense skills. Finally, he had the little guy shout it back, but even such a simple phrase felt like it was about to shatter years of grievances in the boy's heart. Imitating him, he picked up the crude words. The whole woofing mountain was filled with the scattering of birds and beasts. The brainwashing went smoothly. Now, all that's left is to shout the slogan loudly. I watched him shout a crude word at the mountain. Then he followed up with, "We are the best." In short, it's just a bunch of bragging. In the end, they still have to ask the kid if he thinks they are cool. Although their original intention was just to make Shue stay and do chores. Only the boy himself knows how precious this encouragement is to him. Seeing this scene, the bandit leader finally showed a cheerful expression. Next came a barrage of persuasion aimed at him. What we are is the rulers of Woofing Mountain. Here, no one can resist us, and he won't go hungry. Or to say, a young man prefers to be a coward who gets robbed. These words struck Shue directly in the heart. He lowered his head, gritted his teeth and shook his head fiercely, but rather one of those children who were abused while growing up. This makes the rough man feel restless inside. However, his way of dealing with it is rather blunt, clearly telling Shue that joining the gang can lead to freedom. He casually tossed him by the cliff and said nothing, just quietly watched him. From the boy's cowardly behavior, he finally understands what exactly is wrong. The little guy shouldn't be stupid. He doesn't seem like someone who can cook. They also started to feel a headache, longing for such little things. Their big brother, Pang Tianyang, seemed to suddenly have an idea. He grabbed Shue and dragged him outside. Yet the little guy, even though his stomach has been growling for a long time, dare not eat the buns they roasted. The reason he gives is that he has nothing. He can't afford the meal. The young man looks foolish. Shue only understood that the 6 of them were sworn brothers. It's still the mountain bandits on this hill. But in their eyes, since the boy is a beggar, they think that giving him some food would make him grateful. And they are the bandit kings of Woofing Mountain, the free and heroic forest heroes. They didn't care whether the little one understood. They went on with their self-introductions, making quite a commotion. There's no doubt bringing him back to the village as a helper counts as a good deed. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself in this wooden house. I learned from their mouths that this is their stronghold. What bad luck. After observing for a bit, it seems like it's alive. They lamented that they had never seen anyone worse off than themselves. It looks like the little guy should be a beggar. He didn't know how long it had been. But thankfully, the first ones to find him were not wolves or leopards. In his days, he couldn't hear what the two were saying, and they were even more frustrated than Shu'er at that moment. They encountered a dead person early in the morning. His limbs were weak, and his stomach churned like it was on fire, but all that came out was sour water. It was at that moment he realized the mushroom must be poisonous. Before long, he lost consciousness and collapsed on the ground. His current feelings can be described as terrified. He only remembers fleeing from Ruiyang all the way to the deep mountains. He mistakenly ate a beautiful mushroom because he was too hungry. It was just getting dark, and he began to feel dizzy. This group of people looked fierce and menacing. Their minds were also in a fog. Who are they? And why am I here? For a boy whose mind is still stuck at the age of 6. Instead, they often get beaten up by passing caravans. Most of the time, I can only survive by playing jungle. And this time, the boy we picked up seemed to be treated with great care. But in Shu'er's eyes, can this city gate really be held by a person? This is probably the most principled group of bandits I have ever seen. Although they act with the force of plunderers, they merely take a little from those who pass by. They never overstep their bounds. After learning that the other person didn't intend to catch him, he only wanted to know why he ran away upon seeing him. Only then did Shu realize he had been overly submissive. After they left, the old man still couldn't believe his eyes. Just when there was no way to avoid it, the boy turned around and blocked the falling stone at the city gate. He looked apologetic and expressed hope that the man wouldn't catch him, but the uncle was left, confused. It was as if he had seen a glimmer of hope for escape, but this uncle was closely pursuing him. Just as Shu'er was about to escape through the city gate, he caught up. However, the heavy iron that fell from above made him realize he was chasing too eagerly. He just went after him. The two were in a hurry, chasing each other. Shu'er discovered that the other party's lightness skill was extremely impressive. He hadn't been able to completely shake him off throughout the whole journey. At this moment, seeing the city gate that was about to close as night fell, feeling guilty, he took off running. This made the uncle even more alert. He sensed that the people from Wulong Villa were so scared. Could it be that they were involved in something serious? He didn't care whether he wanted to chase or not. He was suddenly called by that person. After 10 years, the man felt that the little kid looked particularly familiar. He thought about asking about his background, but how would Shu'er know his thoughts? But once he sees his face, he realized that the person was actually the swordsman who had sent him into the warehouse back then. He was so frightened that he immediately lowered his head. He definitely did not want to be caught and taken back again. When Zheng Yu was leaving, at this moment, Shu'er is walking through the streets once traversed by Xiao Ye. He looks at the surroundings, which are very different from his memories. He finally realizes that he seems to have stayed in the warehouse for too long. Lost in thought, he accidentally bumps into an uncle. He hurriedly apologizes to him. Turning, Henry, Autososri, Child being sign, Don't, Mandisusia Daniel, Literature Other, Turnstile be Doctorums Tubes, Mansuitive Wise, be Tiais. There are no intrigues like those of the Liu family. He really doesn't want to sever ties with his master and senior sister. Does Anning Spill Blue, Otany Tubes, and Sweal Bonaparte, Joadis, Han stodusty swimming children daughter. Toklinins, Don't autorations, panting shade, to handy, exhausting tears. Wow. Xiao Yi finally spoke up. Although this was the most secluded place in Wolong Villa, there were still many guards. Is there something I shouldn't see? Seeing this, Zhong felt uneasy and rushed over here. What surprised him was that his senior sister had already arrived here. After sensing Yu Wen's presence, although he doesn't have much affection for this half-brother, if the senior he has always admired were to know, he would fear that at this moment, Baiyu's Jinzhong simply informed Yuan of the situation. Upon learning that Shua had been imprisoned in the old warehouse, leaves no room for deception in front of him. Thinking of this, Yuan was also shocked. He is worried that his mother might have done something harmful to his younger brother. To him, but Yuan beside her was not foolish. He knows what his mother is capable of with his younger brother. He also understands just how formidable this younger senior sister is compared to him. He possesses a more suitable reputation than the eldest senior brother. His attention to detail. However, everything in Shua's room, from the bedding to the furniture, looks brand new. This left Xiao Yi completely unconvinced by her words. She turned and left, seeing that this little guy didn't even regard her. A long-lost feeling of frustration and embarrassment surged within her. He stood behind the two, incredibly sullen, yet remained silent. At this moment, Bai Yujin, though a lord of a manor, but the fear of the Nangong family runs too deep. The smile-filled explanations attempt to confuse the truth. A sense of gloom inexplicably filled my heart. It's hard to imagine how, being from noble families, such differing fates could arise, until Yuan asked his mother about Shua's situation. He felt that something was wrong. A woman with skin as icy and bones as jade, yet possessing the wisdom to read human nature. Though she has been a precious gem from a young age, it was her encounter with Shua 10 years ago that left the boy's small frame covered in astonishing scars. Was now just a bit bigger in size. He does not understand the way of survival. They will soon encounter hunger and illness. Then, all they need to do is wait for him to lie dead in the wilderness. That would be the end of it. The squad leader hurriedly expressed his intention to lead the chase personally. However, Bai Eugene unexpectedly showed no concern. In his view, this might be better. A little waste with a mentality stuck at 6 years old. Even if it was caused by last night's storm, he still couldn't figure it out. That kid can't even fight. How did he manage to climb up there? Seeing this scene, there was no time to return home to entertain the Nangong family. He brought his men to the warehouse. Furious, he smashed open the door. What met his eyes was complete chaos. He immediately noticed the damage to the roof. If they find out that the little brat is being held there, he fears that the long-standing feudal Lord Nangong Hu would be the first to take his life. However, the guard's panic made him feel uneasy. Upon learning that the little rascal had escaped from the warehouse last night, he was even more furious. Though he appeared kind and gentle, he understood the young girl's thoughts very well. Taking advantage of everyone entering the estate, he immediately instructed the guard that under no circumstances should the Nangong family be allowed near the warehouse. It also seemed as if he was turning a deaf ear. Although the elder brother scolded the younger sister for her lack of manners, he simply walked straight toward the inner courtyard alone. This scene left everyone puzzled, but Bai Yujing was quite skilled. Xiao Yan was not included, although she had become more exquisite and delicate. Ever since she arrived here, she had been searching everywhere for that frail figure from 10 years ago. Even when faced with Bai Eugene's casual greeting, Bai Eugene also made sure to compliment the young master of the Nangong family. I hear that the nephew Qing Tian is now a well-known swordsman in the martial world. He gazed at the woman beside him with unabashed admiration. For a moment, it seemed that everyone was harmonious and friendly. Yet among them, this has kept Wolong Mountain Villa's reputation intact. At the same time, there is no longer a scene in the villa. After a long separation, they appeared particularly cheerful. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, the next day, Liu Yuan finished his 10 years of study at the Nangong family. He finally returned to Wolong Villa. The Nangong siblings accompanied him due to familial ties. At this moment, Shua's older brother appeared particularly outstanding. For the past 10 years, Bai Eugene has been working tirelessly. Although he understood this was his farewell to himself, but complex feelings surged in his heart. He gazed at the familiar yet unfamiliar city of Luoyang from the rooftop. It seemed he had finally made up his mind. Slowly, he stood up, his body no longer weak. When Shua came to his senses, he looked back. He had intended to share his joy with the only friend he had in the past 10 years. But at that moment, the mirror was already empty. It was as if that guy had never existed at all. Watching him slowly climb onto the roof, the person in the mirror knew it was time to part ways with the little guy. His body gradually disappeared from the mirror. Instead, there was a person whose face couldn't be seen. It seemed as if they were praying for the boy in the mirror. Pointing at the dome of the warehouse, he signaled that Shua could leave now. Looking at the sunlight he hadn't seen for 10 years, he stood still for a long time. Unconsciously, he leaped onto the cluttered floor. He hasn't completely lost his ability to speak. His experiences, however, are stuck at the age of 6. And when he finally masters the last move of the 9 heavens sword technique, the reflection in the mirror appears particularly delighted, but also increasingly illusory. The young man reunites after 10 years. He sees the light of day again. Though he is a peerless sword god, he appears particularly confused because he has been with the reflection in the mirror. Time flies. In an almost completely closed-off and undisturbed environment, 10 years have passed in a blink. 16-year-old Su finally lets out a sigh of relief. Finally, I am just like you. The densely packed words in the letter and the striking 9 heavens sword seemed to come alive and drilled into his mind. Thus, even the 9 heavens sword technique that his father had not obtained was completely imprinted in the mind of this 6-year-old boy. A child who was originally destined to die in this warehouse. Fate has been completely changed. Ultimately, he remains unsatisfied. He planned to cover this strange mirror again, but it seemed like the person in the mirror had something to say to him. With no choice, he lifted the cover once more. However, this little fellow was instantly frozen in place. On top of that, the sly figure in the mirror mocks the little guy in various ways. The sergeant finds that he doesn't really have a reason to learn. Moreover, the things he's learning are becoming increasingly difficult. The physical exertion is growing more intense. He feels hungrier with each practice. Yet gradually, the sword moves he performed became increasingly profound. He truly couldn't resist picking up the stick and began to learn from him. But this time, the difficulty was quite high. Shuya has been trying for several days, but still hasn't mastered a single move. But the momentum that moved without wind also deeply shocked Shuya. But for the little guy, it was already enough to successfully dispel the cold of winter. Although he felt that the movements of the person in the mirror were incredibly cool, he had no intention of continuing to practice. To him, what does this even mean? He personally trained for nearly 10 days, and just this little bit. He struck a pose and almost completed the eruption of true energy. Although he could not feel the real pressure through the mirror, the little guy felt a very comfortable breath swirling inside him. At this moment, Shua was still unaware. This breath is true energy. It is cultivated over time within masters who possess internal strength. But this scene infuriated the person in the mirror. This made her smile with satisfaction. But although the little guy was angry, he could feel that following the other person's movements, he was gradually breaking free from the cold state. In just under a short period of time, the person in the mirror revealed unabashed disdain in his eyes. After doing the golden rooster stands on one leg, he never moved again. As expected, Shua lost his balance. He fell face down, but the more he looked, the more frightened he became. His movements were almost identical to the Nine Heavens sword technique that his elder brother had practiced, only he danced with even more wonder. Unable to resist, I picked up a wooden stick and began to learn from him. I discovered that the little guy had almost no foundation in martial arts. He looked up. He felt that the movements were quite strange, like a startled swan, like a swimming dragon. His gaze was deeply fixed on the figure in the mirror. As he looked at the little creature curled up in the corner, the reflection of Shua in the mirror fell silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a light sigh. He picked up a wooden stick nearby and started dancing with it in front of him. Shua was also drawn to this scene and paid attention. He no longer had the energy to fear this strange thing, although he was indeed startled when he first saw it. But he realized that no matter how frightening his reflection in the mirror was, he couldn't find a way to step out from it. So he wasn't as terrified as he had been before. The little one has been locked in the warehouse for over half a year. The food delivered each day is getting less and less. The guards are calculating when they can collect the corpse of this former young master. At this moment, Shua is indeed starting to lose consciousness. The drafty warehouse, thin clothing, and a body nearly starved to death. The more he wiped this rare item, the more he felt something was off. Suddenly, his reflection in the mirror revealed a serene smile. This is a sinister mirror that bullies children. It has a very wise name, Jutian Shuani, and winter has arrived. Driven by curiosity, he found that there was actually a dusty mirror here. Although he didn't expect that this kind of thing wouldn't be kept by the old lady, he didn't think too much about it. He rolled up his sleeves and decided to wipe it first. Thus, he lived in the Liu family's warehouse, every day surviving on a hard steamed bun and a bowl of murky water. On this day, he still gazed at the rock-like bun in his hand, recalling the wonderful flavors that Xiao Yi once shared with him. He suddenly discovered something sparkling in the corner of the warehouse. In a fit of rage, let the Deadpools throw everything about the old guy into the warehouse, and don't forget to remind them, including that little brat. And Shua's fate was once again manipulated by others. This made him extremely furious. Without the sword manual, and with the Nangong family's attention, he could never find peace or stability. This head of the Liu family, to apprentice under Nangong Hu. From this point on, Bai Yujin completely took control of Wolong Villa, solidifying the Liu family's position. The world only sees him searching through the old master's belongings, but no matter what, he can't find the manual for the Nine Heavens sword technique. In the same year, in the frost month, the legendary sword god Liu Murong never woke up from his dream again. Meanwhile, Bai Yujin summoned 20 death guards from the Bai family. Each one was tasked with protecting Wolong Villa. At the same time, she sent her eldest son Liu Yuan to the Nangong family. Shua's older brother also saw Nangong Ye. Delicate, pure, and coldly beautiful. But after all, he is still just a child. He couldn't describe this sudden panic in his heart. Spring goes and autumn comes. Xiao Yi and Shua's older brothers also arrived. From a distance, the urgent voice of the eldest brother of the Nangong family could be heard. "What are you doing? I've been looking for you everywhere. I thought you went back to climbing the roof again." As I walked in, to understand everything, a pure and intense hostility radiated from him. He stared at him fiercely. At this moment, Bai Eugene from the prohibition flinched in his heart, just as he was about to ask something in confusion. The mothers of both families looked very worried about the children, but when Bai Eugene expressed concern for Shua earnestly, he was trembling uncontrollably. This was felt clearly by Nangong Yi, who was holding his hand. Xiao Yi suddenly seemed just like this. It feels like a dream. Following Xiao Yi, I ate many delicacies at the market that I had never tasted before. I would just wake up from the dream. The guards from the villa also found the two of them. By the time they returned to the villa, it was already late at night. Even though Shu Er is a son of a prestigious family, this is the first time he has tasted hot skewers. To him, this flavor has been etched into his mind. He won't forget it. Her martial skills improve rapidly, advancing by leaps and bounds. But for the first time, she feels the taste of powerlessness in front of Shua. Although I secretly escaped from the Wolong villa with her, I could only buy her some good food. All these years, that child has been mistreated. And it was this young lady from the Nangong family who discovered it all. Xiao Li sees too much suffering in the youth. As a child of privilege, she has been gifted since childhood. The world is filled with mixed feelings, and ultimately, all I can say is to get better soon, whether for your soldiers or for your child. But how would they know that Bai Eugene is filled with jealousy and hatred? This figure truly is beyond ridiculous, a true legend of the martial world, but he is the most incompetent father. Just looking at his current state, I can't really blame him. For 6 years, I never dared to visit him once. Nangong Hu looked at this once prominent figure from afar. He could never have imagined that after the battle with the moon demon, his injuries would be this severe. To put it bluntly, my soul went with him, and he left behind a child who looks just like me. But I really don't have the courage to face him. Although I know that Ning's death is not the child's fault, but I still feel like I would hate him. And he immediately rushed over to check on her condition. But why has Shua's father ignored him for 6 years? And why doesn't he want to pass down the 9-day sword technique? At the end of his life, the father finally revealed his feelings to his sworn brother. On the day Ning left, that are only convenient to reveal when the two are alone together. But before this sworn brother could agree to the request, Liu Murong suddenly started coughing violently. She collapsed onto the table. This scene shocked Nangong Hu greatly. This seems a bit far-fetched. Looking at his longtime brother, Liu Murong, he didn't expect his thoughts to be even more exaggerated. It turns out that she hopes her children can trouble Big Brother to take care of them. And there are some secret matters. He hopes to send his eldest son to learn from him as a disciple. This left Nangong Hu looking particularly surprised. In his view, the Jutian sword technique of the Liu family is not inferior to the martial arts of the Nangong family. When it comes to learning as a disciple, he also left behind a lingering ailment. Before dying, the moon demon shattered into 9 sword energies, scattering throughout the martial world. But just then, Bai Eugene suddenly brought up. The large Nangong Hu was exhausting his combat power alone. At a critical moment, the virtuous Liu Murong has arrived. His 9 heavens sword technique is nearly frenzied in its strikes, though he defeated the moon demon. On the other side, the 2 current sword gods were drinking heavily with their wives in the hall. Only then did the ladies realize that when the moon demon's martial arts reached perfection, he had already surpassed the limits of mortals. The 2 little figures made their way to a dog hole. Watching Xiao Yi, who had dashed out, Su appeared even more frightened at that moment. Lost in thought, Xiao Yes' hand reached out from the hole. The 2 small figures stood together for a long time, until Su could no longer cry out loud. The gurgling sound in his stomach made Xiao Yi stand up. The teacher asked Yu to follow. he would take him to eat something delicious. Seeing such a pitiable child, Nangong Yi let out a soft sigh. He hugged him tightly, as if responding to all his apologies, muttering that it was all right. This pure care was something Shua had never felt since birth. That warmth lasted only a moment. The grievances of 6 years finally couldn't be held back. It made him cry like a child. "What's your name?" After getting Shua's response, he gently reassured the boy. "Don't be afraid, I'll protect you." But what Xiao Yi didn't know was, he recalled everything from the past. His apologies wouldn't stop spilling from his mouth, but he never would have imagined that the other person merely placed a hand on his head. The voice rang in his ears like the sound of silver bells, but a wave of restlessness surged in his heart. He squatted down. "I plan to clean the dust off the boy." It was just that last move that left him utterly defenseless. Xiao, yes. Actions filled him with even more fear, and the little guy's dry mouth kept making sounds of apology. The setting sun cast a glow on the two of them, leaving Xiaoye in silence for a long time. He didn't know what the boy had been through. Xiao Yi felt a bit bewildered. She lightly leaped, then grabbed Shua's collar and slammed him to the ground, revealing the astonishing scars all over his small body at such a young age. If Auntie knew he had interacted with someone from the Nangong family. Thinking of this, his heart tightened even more. He took a deep breath. Suddenly, he wanted to escape. But in such a situation, in Shua's eyes, seemed like a heavenly god about to punish the sinful. Recalling the Nangong family's visit to Wolong Villa, he knew that this girl he had never seen before must be the distinguished guest mentioned by Auntie. Shua, Auntie, burst into tears. This scene left the usually composed and calm Nangong Yi at a loss. But he didn't know how much his appearance had shocked this little guy. And his face, which was as clear as ice and as beautiful as a flower, gradually returning to social interactions, he suddenly realized that the person approaching was a girl who seemed to be around his age. In his eyes, the girl was as delicate as a fairy. He was entranced for a long time, living in fear and despair. However, he still couldn't see who it was, but the intense fear gave him an unexpected strength to kneel again. He hoarsely shouted, I'm sorry, I didn't." But he didn't finish his sentence. Before long, he heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He kept shouting to himself in his heart to move. If the old lady knew, she would be scared. But at this moment, the person had already approached him. He struggled to open his eyes, but he was only 6 years old. He really didn't dare to resist the oppressive power of Bai Yujin. He could only endure. Zhong had lost his last bit of strength. He fell to the ground. As soon as they arrived at the estate, she ran off to wander by herself. At that moment, Shua was following the usual request from his aunt, enduring punishment alone by the courtyard wall. He could hardly remember how many times this had happened, but at that moment, he felt tired, exhausted, and hungry. He brings the 3 of them, his siblings, outside the mansion. Although the old man resembles a withered branch, he showed a long-lost joy when facing his life-and-death brother. After some polite exchanges, they learned that the Nangong family also brought along a 7-year-old girl. However, she couldn't stand the boredom of the journey, but he currently has no room for choice. His father did not pass down the 9 heavens sword technique. No matter how high he claims to be, he is just a young master of a noble family. He is like that foolish younger brother, obedient to his mother's arrangements. He takes Bai Yujin. He early on displayed an unusual calmness and numbness, and in the face of the visit from the sword god of the Nangong family, his mother insisted that he must be polite, friendly, and warm. He is also clear that this is his mother's intention. She hopes to unite the 2 families through him. There is complexity in his eyes. His own mother lived a really suffocating life, because of him. And this younger brother has also lost his mother. He really doesn't know how to evaluate this, who is right and who is wrong. Looking at the not-so-foolish boy, this aunt stared at him for a long time, not understanding his deeper meaning. She casually threw away the towel used to wipe the blood, and told him to clean up quickly. Hurry up and get lost, as her eldest son Bai Eugene watched his half-brother. Meanwhile, the child on the ground coughed up blood. As he struggled to get up, "I'll make sure to stay far away. I definitely won't let my filthy appearance be seen by the guests. I won't embarrass sword god Liu Jia." In his view, no matter how much he did, it was far less than what a brother of the master could achieve. After a 6-year absence, he looked at Shua with even colder disdain. He sternly asked if he knew what he should do, only able to eat. At this moment, the housekeeper brought news that the head of the Nunggong family had arrived outside the manor, and the master, who hadn't left his room for 6 years, was waiting outside. These words made the woman unusually sullen, and although the aunt was the rightful wife of the messenger, he tried every means to get his father out of the shadows. In the end, he failed. From then on, Shua became the target of his resentment. This left him living almost like an animal for the past 6 years. Meanwhile, his father was eliminating his mother-in-law's plot to slaughter the martial arts world with his close friend, though they became legends in the martial arts world that day. After returning, his father's deep love for his wife made it impossible for him to let go. He locked himself in the room where she lived for 6 whole years, but his life is worth less than livestock. The old lady's beatings and harsh criticism are already common occurrences, and his hands are stained with his own blood. 6 years ago, on the day he was born, his mother passed away. Watch it all in one breath for 9 days. No cuts in the swordplay. Attacking PD's behavior. Please like and contribute. A 6-year-old child